Hello, friends. Did you know that nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy the content, I'd truly appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. It helps a lot. Also, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. 17 years. That's how long I've been working highway patrol out here in Wyoming. 14 and 16, those highways run through the Absaroka Range just east of Yellowstone country. I know every turnout, every cattle guard along those routes, and exactly where the ice starts to form when the temperatures turn cold enough. I've recovered bodies from crashed cars in conditions that left me unable to see my hand in front of my face. I've calmed folk down from standing on guardrails along the road. I've watched wildlife behave in ways that forced me to question everything I ever thought I knew about behavior patterns among animals. Yet, nothing in all those 17 years prepared me for events that would go down over 4 nights last November. I am Carter, 43 years old, living in a small community on the outskirts of Cody, alternating shifts, which lands me nights every other month. I like working nights. Less traffic is on the road, so is the talk on the radio, which allows long periods with nothing but the road, the night, and the silence of the high country in front of you. It is there that I first spotted it. November 8th. Clear night, low 20s, not a breath of air. I'm running eastbound on US 14, doing my patrol stint between Cody and the turnoff to Shell, when the onset of midnight hits. The road winds through some sharp switchbacks before leveling off at the top of a high ridge that offers a vistas of the Bighorn Basin on one side and a granite wall of peaks on the other. I know this section of the road backwards and forwards. There is a pull-off spot up top that I normally pull into to check messages and let the engine idle while I survey the countryside below. I pulled in, set the parking brake, and cut the headlights. My dashboard lights gave off a faint glow. I could see my breath in the cab. I poured coffee from my thermos and was raising the cup when I noticed something wrong with the sky. There was a light on the ridgeline to the northwest. Not a star, not a plane, not a tower. It sat perfectly still above a peak I recognized, a sharp granite point locals call Anvil Top. The light was blue, not the pale blue of dawn or the hot blue of a welder's torch. It was the color of deep water under ice, steady and cold. I set my coffee down and reached for my binoculars. I keep a good pair in the door pocket for glassing elk and checking license plates at distance. I raised them and focused. The light resolved into a sphere. It hovered maybe 200 feet above the ridgeline, motionless. The surface didn't glow like a bulb. It looked solid, like a ball of polished metal catching light from somewhere I couldn't see. There was no beam coming down from it, no beam going up. It just sat there, perfectly round, perfectly still. I lowered the binoculars and looked with my naked eye. Still there. I raised them again. The sphere hadn't moved. Not a drift, not a rotation, nothing. I've seen drones. I've seen weather balloons. I've seen flares and fireworks and experimental aircraft out of the bases near Sheridan. This was none of those things. I picked up my radio mic and keyed it. "Dispatch, this is Unit 12. The reply came back scratchy but clear. "Go ahead, 12. I'm at the Anvil Top overlook. I have a visual on an unidentified light source northwest of my position, approximately 2 miles out, hovering above the ridgeline. Can you confirm any aircraft in the area?" There was a pause. I could hear keyboard clicks. "Negative, 12. No flight plans filed for that corridor tonight. Can you describe the light?" "Blue sphere, stationary. No visible propulsion or support. It's been holding position for 3 minutes. Another pause. "Copy that. Do you need backup?" I thought about it. What would backup do? Stare at it with me? I said negative. I'll keep eyes on it and report any changes. Copy. Stay safe. I set the mic down and watched. My coffee went cold in the cup holder. 5 minutes. 10. The sphere didn't move. Then, without warning, it did. It slid east. Not a gradual drift. It moved like someone had pulled it on a wire, smooth and fast, and stopped above another peak a mile away. It held there for maybe 30 seconds, then slid back west to its original position. The movement was so precise it looked mechanical, but there was no sound. Not even a whisper of rotor wash or engine hum carried across the valley. My hands were shaking, not from cold. I started the engine and pulled back onto the highway. I drove east toward Shell, checking my mirror every few seconds. The light stayed where it was until I dropped below the ridgeline and lost line of sight. When I got home that morning, I didn't mention it to my wife. I told myself I'd seen something explainable, and my mind had filled in the gaps. But I didn't believe that. I'd seen what I'd seen. The next night, I requested the same patrol route. Dispatch raised an eyebrow over the radio but didn't push. I wanted to go back to that overlook. I needed to know if it would be there again. November 9th. Same conditions. Clear, cold, no wind. I reached the pullout at 12:15 a.m. and cut my lights. I didn't wait. I grabbed the binoculars immediately and scanned the ridge. Nothing. I felt a strange mix of relief and disappointment. I poured coffee and sat there for 20 minutes, glassing the peaks, the valleys, the distant glow of Cody to the west. The sky was clean, just stars and the faint edge of the Milky Way. I was about to leave when my radio crackled. Unit 12, this is dispatch. Go ahead. We're getting a call from the fire lookout tower on Bald Ridge. The operator reports unusual radar interference and requests a welfare check if you're in the area. Bald Ridge was 15 miles south of my position, accessible by a Forest Service road that branched off US 14. I knew the tower. I'd met the guy who worked it a few times. His name was Miles. He was in his late 20s, quiet, spent most of his shifts alone scanning for smoke and logging weather patterns. Copy that, I'm en route. I took the turnoff and followed the dirt road up through a dense stand of lodgepole pine. The road was rough but passable. My headlights cut through the dark and threw long shadows across the tree trunks. After 20 minutes, I reached the base of the tower. It's a tall steel frame structure with a small enclosed cabin at the top, maybe 60 feet off the ground. A single light burned in the cabin window. I parked and got out. The air was colder here, thinner. I could see my breath in thick clouds. I climbed the wooden stairs that zigzagged up the frame. My boots made hollow thumps on each step. When I reached the top, I knocked on the door. Miles opened it. He looked pale. His eyes were wide and his hands moved like he didn't know where to put them. "Thanks for coming," he said. His voice was tight. "Dispatch said you had radar trouble." "Yeah, come in." The cabin was small, maybe 10 by 10 feet, with windows on all sides. A desk sat in the center with a radar screen, a weather station readout, and a logbook. A cot was pushed against one wall. A propane heater glowed in the corner. Miles pointed to the radar screen. "Look at this." I leaned over. The screen showed a topographical overlay of the surrounding area with range rings radiating out from the tower. Normally, you'd see weather patterns, maybe a few aircraft if they were low enough. What I saw instead was a void. A perfect circle of empty space sat northwest of the tower, roughly 2 miles out. Inside that circle, there was no return signal, no ground clutter, no precipitation, nothing. It was like someone had cut a hole in the world and the radar couldn't see through it. "How long has it been like this?" I asked. "Started about an hour ago. At first, I thought the system was glitching us, so I rebooted it twice. Same thing. Then I went outside to see if I could spot anything. Did you? He nodded and pointed through the north-facing window. Out there, above the ridge. I looked. At first I saw nothing but darkness and stars. Then I saw it. The blue sphere. It sat exactly where it had been the night before, hovering above Anvil Top. My stomach dropped. You see that? I see it, Miles said. What the hell is it? I don't know. We stood there watching it together. The sphere held its position. The radar screen continued to show the void. Miles's hand went to a pair of binoculars on the desk. He raised them, focused, then lowered them slowly. It's not moving, he said. I know. But look at the trees below it. I took the binoculars from him and glassed the area. The trees on the ridge were swaying. Not violently, but enough to show that wind was moving through the valley. The sphere didn't react to it. No drift, no wobble. Nothing. What do we do? Miles asked. I didn't have an answer. I keyed my radio. Dispatch, this is Unit 12. I'm at Bald Ridge Tower with the operator. We have visual confirmation of the light source from last night. It's holding position above Anvil Top Ridge. Radar is showing an anomaly at the same location. Dispatch came back after a long pause. Copy, 12. Do you need air support? Negative. There's no threat at this time, but I'm recommending someone higher up the chain get notified. Understood. I'll pass it along. Miles and I took turns watching it for the next 2 hours. We didn't talk much. What was there to say? Around 3 a.m., the sphere moved. It slid south along the ridge, paused, then dropped below the skyline and disappeared. The radar void vanished with it. The screen returned to normal. Ground clutter, weather patterns, everything came back like someone had flipped a switch. Miles sat down hard on his cot. Did that just happen? It happened. I stayed with him until dawn. We drank coffee and tried to make sense of it. We couldn't. When the sun came up and the valley turned gray, I left him there and drove back to Cody. I didn't sleep that day. I sat at my kitchen table and stared at the wall. That night, I went back. November 10th. I didn't wait for my shift to start. I drove out to the overlook at 11 p.m. and parked in the same spot. The temperature had dropped to 15 degrees. Frost covered my windshield within minutes. I scanned the ridge with my binoculars. Nothing at first. Then, at 11:47 p.m., it appeared. The blue sphere rose from behind Anvil Top, like it had been waiting there, hidden. It climbed slowly, stopped at the same altitude as before, and held. I grabbed my radio. Miles, this is Carter. You on? His voice came through immediately. He'd been waiting. I'm here, I see it. Same position as last night? Exact same. And Carter, the radar void is back. I felt my chest tighten. Copy that. I decided to move closer. I started my engine and pulled onto the highway heading west toward the ridge. There was a Forest Service road that would get me within a mile of Anvil Top if I was willing to push my vehicle through some rough terrain. I was willing. The turnoff was unmarked, just a gap in the trees with 2 faint ruts. I took it slow, headlights bouncing over rocks and roots. The road climbed steeply. My tires slipped on loose gravel but held. After 15 minutes, I reached a flat spot where the trees opened up and the ridge came into view. I cut my lights and stepped out. The sphere was directly ahead, maybe 800 yards away, hovering above the ridge line. From this distance, I could see more detail. The surface had texture, like brushed metal. It rotated slowly on an invisible axis. There was no sound. I raised my binoculars again and froze. Below the sphere, on the ridge itself, 3 shapes moved through the rocks. They were small, no taller than 4 feet, and they walked in a line. Their movement was deliberate, methodical. They weren't animals. Animals don't move in perfect formation. They weren't people. The proportions were wrong. I lowered the binoculars and felt my breath catch. I raised them again. The shapes were still there, crossing a bare section of rock. As I watched, one of them stopped and turned its head toward me. I couldn't see features. It was too dark and too far, but I felt seen. My radio crackled. "Carter, you there?" I keyed the mic without lowering the binoculars. "I'm here. Something's happening. The void is expanding." I looked at the sphere. It pulsed once, a brief flash of brighter blue, and then the light changed. It went from cold blue to white, harsh and sudden. The ridge lit up like midday. Every rock, every tree, every shadow became visible. The 3 shapes froze in place. My engine died. No sputter, no warning. The dashboard lights went dark. The radio cut to static. I tried the ignition. Nothing. I tried again. Dead. The white light held for 3 seconds, then snapped off. The sphere returned to blue. My engine turned over on its own and roared to life. The dashboard lights flickered back on. The radio hissed and cleared. Miles's voice came through, shaky. "Carter, what just happened?" "I don't know. My engine died and came back. Did your systems go down?" "Everything. Radar, lights, heater, all of it. Then it came back." I looked at the ridge. The 3 shapes were gone. The sphere remained, hovering in silence. I made a decision. "Miles, I'm coming to you. Stay put. Copy." I turned my vehicle around and drove back down the Forest Service road faster than I should have. My hands were shaking on the wheel. By the time I reached the highway and turned toward Bald Ridge, my heart was hammering in my chest. I made it to the tower in under 20 minutes and climbed the stairs 2 at a time. Miles opened the door before I could knock. "It's still there," he said, pointing northwest. We stood at the window and watched it together. The sphere held its position. The radar void pulsed on the screen like a slow heartbeat. "What do you think those things were?" Miles asked. "I don't know. But you saw them." "I saw something." He turned to me. "We need to report this properly, not just dispatch. Someone who can actually do something." "Like who?" "I don't know. The Air Force? NORAD?" I shook my head. "You think they're going to scramble jets because 2 guys in Wyoming saw a light?" "It's not just a light, Carter. You know that." He was right. But I also knew how this worked. We'd file a report, it would get buried in paperwork, and nothing would happen, unless we had proof. "Do you have a camera?" I asked. Miles nodded and pulled a digital camera from a drawer. It was a decent one, the kind used for documenting fire damage. He handed it to me. "Let's get a photo." We went outside onto the catwalk that circled the cabin. The wind hit us immediately, sharp and cold. I raised the camera and zoomed in on the sphere. Through the viewfinder, it looked even stranger. The surface wasn't smooth. It had patterns, geometric shapes that shifted as it rotated. I took 3 photos. The camera struggled to focus, but the last one looked clear. I checked the screen. The sphere was visible, a bright blue dot against the black ridge. "Got it," I said. We went back inside. Miles downloaded the photo to his computer and pulled it up on the screen. We both leaned in. The sphere was there, distinct and undeniable. But something else was in the frame. In the lower right corner, partially obscured by the tree line, was one of the shapes. It stood upright on 2 legs, arms at its sides, head tilted slightly as if it was looking at the camera. Miles made a sound in his throat. "What is that?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because looking at that shape, frozen in a photograph, made it real in a way that watching it through binoculars hadn't. We printed the photo and I put it in my jacket pocket. Then we sat in the cabin and waited for dawn. Neither of us slept. We drank coffee and kept our eyes on the ridge. At 5:30 a.m., the sphere descended below the skyline. The radar void disappeared. The sun began to rise, turning the valley orange and gold. I left Miles at the tower and drove back to Cody. I went straight to the station and requested a meeting with my supervisor. He was a man in his 50s named Garrett, a career officer who'd seen enough strange things in the backcountry not to dismiss anything outright. I laid the photo on his desk. This was taken last night from Bald Ridge Tower. I witnessed it myself, along with the tower operator. Garrett picked up the photo and studied it. His expression didn't change. What am I looking at? An unidentified object hovering above Anvil Top Ridge, and in the lower corner, something that's not human. He set the photo down and looked at me. "You're serious?" "Dead serious. This is the third night in a row it's appeared. It's interfering with radar. It's causing electrical failures in vehicles, and there are things moving on the ridge below it." Garrett leaned back in his chair. "You know what happens if I send this up the chain?" "I know. You'll get questions. A lot of them. And if this turns out to be a prank or a weather phenomenon, it'll be your career." "I understand." He tapped the photo with his finger. "But you're standing by this?" "Yes, sir." He nodded slowly. "All right, I'll make the call. But Carter, you need to stay available. And you need to write this up in detail. Everything you saw, everything you heard, times and locations. I will." I spent the rest of that day writing a report. I included every detail I could remember, from the first sighting to the electrical failures to the shapes on the ridge. I attached the photograph and a statement from Miles confirming the radar anomalies. When I finished, I handed it to Garrett. He read it twice, signed it, and sent it up to the regional office. Then I went home and finally slept. I didn't sleep long, 4 hours maybe. I woke up with my phone buzzing on the nightstand. It was Garrett. "Carter, I need you back at the station. Now." "What's going on?" "Just get here." I threw on my uniform and drove in. The station was quiet when I arrived. It was mid-afternoon, the shift change an hour away. Garrett met me at the door and walked me to a back conference room I'd only been in twice before, both times for interviews after serious incidents. Inside the room were 2 men I didn't recognize. They wore plain dark suits and no badges. One was older, gray hair, sharp eyes. The other was younger, built like he spent time in a gym. They didn't stand when I entered. "Officer Carter," the older one said. "Have a seat." I sat. Garrett closed the door and stood by it with his arms crossed. The older man opened a folder. My report was inside. "We've read this. We've also spoken to Miles at the fire tower. His account matches yours." "Good," I said. "We're here to ask you some follow-up questions. This conversation is being recorded." He gestured to a small device on the table. "Do you consent?" "I do." "Describe what you saw the first night, everything." I walked them through it. The blue sphere above Anvil Top, the way it moved in precise lines, the stillness despite the wind. They didn't interrupt, they took notes. When I finished, the younger one spoke. "Did you experience any physical symptoms during the sightings? Headaches, nausea, dizziness?" "No." "Did your vehicle show any lasting damage after the electrical failure?" "No, it restarted on its own and has functioned normally since." "Did you see any markings or symbols on the object?" "No." The surface had geometric patterns, but nothing I could identify as language or symbols. The older man tapped the photograph. This figure in the corner. How certain are you that it's not a rock formation or a tree? It was moving when I saw it through binoculars. Rocks don't move. Could it have been a person, a hiker? At that elevation in the middle of the night in freezing temperatures, walking in formation with two others? No, he nodded. We're going to need you to take us to the locations. Tonight. I looked at Garrett. He gave a small nod. All right, I said. We left the station at 10 p.m. I drove my patrol vehicle. The two men followed in an unmarked SUV with government plates. We didn't use radios. They'd given me a phone and told me to call if we got separated. I took them to the overlook first. We parked side by side and got out. The night was colder than the previous ones, maybe 10 degrees. The sky was clear. I pointed northwest toward Anvil Top. That's where it was. Every night, same position. The older man raised a set of high-end binoculars and scanned the ridge. After a full minute, he lowered them. Nothing yet. We waited. The younger man set up a tripod with a camera that had a lens longer than my forearm. He aimed it at the ridge and started taking long exposures. At 11:52 p.m., it appeared. The blue sphere rose from behind Anvil Top exactly as it had before. It climbed to the same altitude and stopped. There, I said. Both men saw it. The older one raised his binoculars again. The younger one adjusted his camera and started firing off shots. The shutter clicked rapidly. Confirmed visual, the older man said into a handheld radio I hadn't seen him carrying. Object is present, holding position above target ridge, a voice crackled back. I couldn't make out the words. He turned to me. Show us the Forest Service road. We got back in our vehicles and I led them to the turnoff. My headlights found the ruts and we started the climb. The SUV behind me had better clearance than my patrol car, but we both made it to the flat spot without trouble. I parked and killed my lights. They did the same. We stepped out into the cold. The sphere was directly ahead, closer now, maybe 600 yards. It rotated slowly, the surface catching starlight. The younger man set up his tripod again and started shooting. Do you see the shapes? The older man asked me. I raised my binoculars and scanned the ridge below the sphere. At first, nothing. Then I saw them. 3 figures, same as before, moving in a line across the rocks. I see them, lower right quadrant, moving east. He didn't respond. He was already on his radio. We have ground-level movement, 3 entities, repeat, 3 entities on the ridge. The voice on the other end said something I couldn't hear. Then, everything changed. The sphere pulsed. The light shifted from blue to white, brighter than before, and the ridge lit up like a flare had gone off. I could see every detail. The rocks, the sparse vegetation, the 3 shapes frozen mid-step. My patrol car's engine died. The SUV's engine died. Every light went dark. My watch stopped. The camera stopped clicking. The white light held. I could hear my own heartbeat. Nothing else. No wind, no distant traffic, no sound at all. Then a hum started, low, subsonic, the kind of thing you feel more than hear. It pressed against my chest like a physical weight. My teeth buzzed in my skull. The older man grabbed my arm. Get down. We dropped to the ground behind my vehicle. The younger man was already crouched by the SUV, camera abandoned. The hum grew louder. I could feel it in my bones. The sphere descended. It came down slowly, vertically, until it was level with the ridge. The 3 shapes walked toward it. They didn't hurry. When they reached the sphere, they stopped. A section of the sphere's surface opened. I don't know how else to describe it. There was no seam, no hatch, just an opening that formed as if the metal were liquid. The three shapes walked into it one by one and disappeared. The opening closed. The sphere rose back to its original altitude. The white light snapped off. The hum stopped. My patrol car's engine roared to life on its own. So did the SUV. Lights came back on. My watch started ticking again. I looked at the older man. His face was pale. The younger one stood up slowly, breathing hard. "Did you get that on camera?" the older man asked. "I don't know." "The camera died. Check it." He picked up the camera and hit the playback button. The screen flickered to life. He scrolled through the images. Most were of the sphere hovering. Then there was one of the white light, overexposed and blown out. Then nothing. The camera had stopped recording before the shapes entered the sphere. The older man cursed under his breath. He keyed his radio. "Object has retrieved ground entities. We have partial documentation, requesting immediate analysis and support." The voice on the other end responded. I caught the words, "Sit tight," and back up inbound. We stayed there for another hour. The sphere remained in place. It didn't move, it didn't pulse. It just hovered, rotating slowly. At 1:30 a.m., headlights appeared on the Forest Service road. 2 more SUVs rolled in, both black, both unmarked. 6 people got out. They wore tactical gear and carried equipment cases. One of them was a woman with short gray hair who introduced herself only as Dr. Reeves. She set up a portable radar unit and a spectrum analyzer. The rest of her team spread out with handheld devices I didn't recognize. They worked in silence, taking readings, recording data, communicating through headsets. After 30 minutes, Dr. Reeves came over to where I was standing with the 2 men in suits. "Electromagnetic activity is off the charts," she said. "Whatever that thing is, it's generating a field strong enough to interfere with anything electronic within half a mile. Can you identify it?" the older man asked. "No. The signature doesn't match anything in our database." "What about the entities?" "If they were biological, we'd expect heat signatures. We're not seeing any. Either they're not producing heat, or they're shielded in some way we can't detect." She looked at me. "You saw them up close through binoculars?" "As close as I could get." "Describe them." I did. The height, the proportions, the way they moved in perfect formation. She listened without expression, then turned back to her equipment. The sphere remained for another 2 hours. At 3:47 a.m., it descended below the ridgeline and disappeared. The electromagnetic readings dropped to normal. The team packed up their gear and left without another word to me. The older man in the suit handed me a card with a phone number on it. "If it comes back, call this number immediately. Don't use dispatch. Don't tell anyone else." "What about Miles?" "He's been briefed. Same instructions." "What's going to happen now?" "That's not something you need to worry about. You did your job. We'll take it from here." They got in their SUV and drove away. I was left alone on the mountain with my patrol car and more questions than I'd started with. I drove back to Cody as the sun was coming up. The valley was turning pink and orange. I could see the Bighorn Basin spreading out below, vast and empty. It should have felt peaceful. It didn't. I went home and sat at my kitchen table. My wife was already up, making coffee. She looked at me and knew something was wrong. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah." "You don't look okay." I wanted to tell her everything. I couldn't. I'd been ordered not to. And even if I hadn't been, how do you explain something like that? How do you put it into words that don't sound insane? "Just a long shift," I said. She didn't believe me, but she let it go. I slept for a few hours, then got up and went back to the station. Garrett called me into his office as soon as I arrived. "Those men came back this morning," he said. "They took all the files related to your sighting, the report, the photo, everything." "Did they say why?" "National security. That's all they told me." He looked at me hard. "Carter, I need you to understand something. This case is closed as far as we're concerned. You're not to discuss it with anyone. Not other officers, not civilians, not family. Are we clear?" "Clear. Good. Now, get some rest. You're off rotation for the next 3 days." I nodded and left. I spent those 3 days at home, trying to act normal. I watched TV, I did yard work, I cooked dinner, but every night I found myself standing in the driveway looking northwest toward the mountains, waiting to see a blue light rise above the ridge. It didn't. On the 4th day, I called the number on the card the older man had given me. A woman answered. "Yes? This is Officer Carter. I was told to call if there were any developments." "Have there been?" "No. I just wanted to know if you'd learned anything." There was a pause. "That information is classified. If there are no new developments, we have nothing further to discuss. Can you at least tell me if it's been seen elsewhere?" "No comment. Is there anything else?" "No." She hung up. I went back to work the following week. My rotation put me on day shift away from the mountain roads. I didn't complain. I worked traffic stops and accident calls and domestic disputes. Normal things. Safe things. Miles called me 2 weeks later. We met for coffee in Cody, at a place far enough from the station that we wouldn't run into anyone we knew. "Have they contacted you again?" he asked. "No, you?" "Once. They came to the tower and installed new radar equipment. They said the old system was faulty. They told me to report any anomalies directly to them, not through dispatch." "Have you seen anything?" He shook his head. "Nothing. It's like it never happened." But it had happened. We both knew it. We finished our coffee in silence and went our separate ways. I haven't spoken to him since. Winter came hard that year. The roads turned to ice. The mountains disappeared behind snow and cloud for weeks at a time. I worked my shifts and kept my head down. Every time I drove past the turnoff to Bald Ridge, I kept my eyes on the road. In January, something happened that brought it all back. I was off duty, at home, when my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Officer Carter?" A man's voice, unfamiliar. "Who is this?" "My name is Dr. Marcus Hale. I'm a research scientist with the Atmospheric Studies program out of Colorado. I was given your name by a colleague who thought you might be willing to talk to me." "About what?" "About what you saw in November, above Anvil Top Ridge." I should have hung up. I'd been ordered not to discuss it, but I was tired of carrying it alone. "I can't talk about that." "I understand, but I'm not asking for an official statement. I'm conducting independent research on similar phenomena. What you saw isn't unique. It's been reported in 7 other locations across Wyoming, Montana, and Colorado over the past 5 years. That stopped me. 7? Yes, all of them in remote mountain areas. All of them involving blue spherical objects and electromagnetic interference. 3 of them involving ground-level entities matching your description. How do you know what I saw? I have contacts. People talk. Listen, I'm not asking you to go on record. I just want to understand what's happening. Can we meet? I thought about it. Where? Anywhere you're comfortable. We met 2 days later at a rest stop outside Powell, halfway between Cody and his location in Colorado. He pulled up in a beat-up Subaru with university stickers on the bumper. He was in his 40s, thin, with wire-rimmed glasses and a nervous energy that made him hard to read. We sat in my truck with the engine running for heat. He had a laptop and a file folder stuffed with papers. "Thank you for meeting me," he said. "I know this isn't easy. Just tell me what you know." He opened the laptop and pulled up a map. 7 red dots were scattered across the region. One of them was right over Anvil Top. These are confirmed sightings that match a specific pattern: blue sphere, electromagnetic interference, radar anomalies, and in some cases, small bipedal entities. The first report came from a ranch in Montana in 2018. The most recent was yours. What are they? I don't know, but I can tell you what they're not. They're not military. I've checked with every Air Force base, every research facility, every contractor with experimental aircraft in this region. None of them claim it. Could they be lying? Possible, but unlikely. The technology required to create something that behaves the way these objects behave doesn't exist. Not publicly, anyway. I stared at the map. What do you think they are? He hesitated. I think there's something we don't have a framework for. Something outside our current understanding of physics. You mean extraterrestrial. He winced at the word. I mean non-conventional. Whether that's extraterrestrial, interdimensional, or something else entirely, I can't say. What about the entities? What are they doing? That's what I'm trying to figure out. In every case where entities were observed, they were seen collecting something. Soil samples, vegetation, rocks. In one case in Montana, they were seen near a creek, apparently collecting water. Collecting for what? I don't know, but it's consistent. They're gathering data or resources. I leaned back in my seat. The government knows about this. They do, and they're suppressing it. Every report gets buried, every witness gets silenced. I've tried to publish papers on this. They've all been rejected or pulled before publication. I've been warned to drop it. Then why are you still doing this? He looked at me with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. Because it's real, and because people deserve to know. We talked for another hour. He showed me reports from other witnesses. A hunter in Montana who'd seen a blue sphere hover over a lake for 3 hours. A forest ranger in Colorado who'd photographed entities collecting pine cones. A rancher in Wyoming whose cattle had refused to cross a field for weeks after a sighting. All of them had been told to keep quiet. All of them had been visited by men in suits. Before he left, Dr. Hale gave me his card. If you see it again, call me. I can't do anything official, but I'm documenting all of this. Someday, it's going to come out. I took the card and watched him drive away. February, March. The snow melted. The roads cleared. I went back to night shift and found myself on the same routes I'd driven before. I told myself I wasn't looking for it, but I was. On March 19th, I was called to a single-vehicle accident on US 14, just west of the Anvil Top overlook. A pickup truck had gone off the road and rolled down an embankment. The driver was shaken but alive. He was a local, a man in his 60s I'd seen around Cody. While the tow truck worked to pull his vehicle back onto the road, I asked him what had happened. "Lost control," he said. "Swerved to avoid something in the road." "What did you see?" He hesitated. "You're going to think I'm crazy." "Try me." There was a light, bright blue. It came down from the sky and hovered right over the road. I hit the brakes, and the truck just stopped working. Everything shut off. The light moved off to the side, and my truck started rolling backward. I couldn't stop it. I felt my stomach tighten. When did this happen? About an hour ago, maybe 10:30. Did you report it? To who? I called for a tow and you showed up. Did the light do anything else? It moved off toward the ridge, and then it was gone. Whole thing lasted maybe 30 seconds. I wrote it up as a mechanical failure. I didn't mention the light, but I called Der Hale the next day and told him what the driver had said. It's still active, he said. That's important. Most of these sightings occur in clusters over a few weeks, then stop for months or years. But if it's still appearing in the same location, that suggests something different. Like what? Like it's monitoring something specific. A site, a resource, maybe even a person. That thought stayed with me. What if it wasn't random? What if there was a reason it kept coming back to Anvil Top? I started doing my own research. I looked up the geological history of the area. Anvil Top sits on a granite formation that dates back billions of years. There are old mining claims nearby, mostly abandoned. No active industry, no military installations, nothing that would draw attention. But there was something. In the 1950s, a uranium prospecting company had surveyed the area. They'd found trace amounts, but nothing worth extracting. The records were buried in old county files I had to request through the library. I called Der Hale and told him. Uranium, he said. That's interesting. Several of the other sighting locations have similar geological features. Granite formations with trace radioactive elements. You think that's what they're looking for? Maybe. Or maybe it's a marker for something else. Geomagnetic anomalies, fault lines, underground water sources. We don't know. April came. I was sitting in my patrol car at the overlook, same spot as always, when the radio crackled. It was Miles. Carter, you there? I picked up. I'm here. It's back, right now, same position. I looked northwest. The blue sphere was there, hovering above Anvil Top. My heart started pounding. I see it. How long? Just appeared 2 minutes ago. Radar void is active. I grabbed my phone and called the number the older man in the suit had given me. It rang 4 times, then went to voicemail. I left a message. This is Officer Carter. The object has returned. I'm at the overlook. Contact me immediately. No one called back. I called Der Hale. He answered on the first ring. It's here, I said. Right now. I'm 3 hours away. Can you stay there? I can try. I stayed. I watched the sphere hover, motionless, as the minutes turned into hours. At 2 a.m., it began to descend. It dropped below the ridgeline slowly, deliberately. I grabbed my binoculars and tracked it until it disappeared. Then I did something I'd been avoiding for months. I got in my car and drove to the Forest Service Road. I followed it up to the flat spot and parked. The night was silent. The sphere was gone. But I walked toward the ridge anyway, flashlight in hand. I found something. At the base of Anvil Top, in a small clearing surrounded by rocks, the ground was different. It looked disturbed, like soil that had been turned over and packed down again. I crouched and touched it. It was warm. Not hot, just warm, even though the air temperature was in the 30s. I took photos with my phone. I collected a soil sample in an evidence bag I keep in my car. Then I got out of there. Dr. Hale met me in Cody the next day. I gave him the sample. He sent it to a lab he trusted, one that wouldn't ask questions. The results came back a week later. The soil contained elevated levels of isotopes that don't occur naturally in that concentration. The lab couldn't identify them. This is evidence, Der Hale said. Real physical evidence. What do we do with it? I don't know yet, but it's a start. It's been 8 months since I last saw the blue sphere. I've driven past Anvil Top hundreds of times. I've stopped at the overlook. I've scanned the ridge. It hasn't returned. Miles reports the same. No radar anomalies, no sightings, nothing. The men in suits never called me back. The number on the card is disconnected. Dr. Hale continues his research, but he's careful. He knows what happens to people who push too hard. I still have the soil sample results. I keep them in a safe at home, along with the photos I took that night. I don't know what they prove. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. I'm writing this because I think people should know. Not because I want attention or because I think I have all the answers. I don't. But I saw something in the Absaroka Mountains that doesn't fit into any box we've made for the world. And I'm not the only one. If you work nights in the high country and you see a blue light that doesn't move with the wind, don't ignore it. Document it. Take photos. Get witnesses. Call someone you trust. And if your vehicle dies without warning and the air starts to hum like the ground is singing, get out of there. Don't try to get closer. Don't try to make sense of it in the moment. Just leave. I kept my job. I kept my life. But I carry this with me every time I drive that road. I look northwest toward Anvil Top and I remember what I saw. The blue sphere, the white flash, the shapes walking in formation across the ridge. I don't know what they were. I don't know what they wanted. I don't know if they'll come back. But I know they were real. And I know I'm not done watching the sky. My name is Lena Hartwell. I'm 38 years old. I've been a wildlife photographer for 15 years, working freelance for magazines and conservation groups out of a small cabin I rent outside Jackson, Wyoming. Most people who do this work last 5 years before they burn out or go broke. I've stayed because I'm good at being alone, and because the mountains give me something I can't find anywhere else. Clarity, maybe. Or just distance from everything that feels wrong about the world below. I know the Absaroka Range the way some people know their childhood home. I can point to drainages on a topo map and tell you which ones hold snow until July and which ones turn into muddy traps when the spring melt hits. I know where the elk congregate when the first cold snaps roll through, and where the wolves den when they want to stay hidden from hunters and hikers. I've spent more nights under canvas in those mountains than I have in my own bed. I thought I understood what I was dealing with out there. Wildlife, weather, the occasional lost hiker who didn't respect the terrain. I was wrong about all of it. In late October of last year, I took an assignment from a conservation magazine to document a wolf pack that had been radio-collared the previous spring. The biologists wanted updated photos and behavioral data. The GPS pings from the collars put the pack in a drainage basin east of the thoroughfare region, deep in the Absarokas where the trails peter out and the country gets serious. I could have gone alone. I've done harder trips. But the editor insisted I take a guide. Someone who knew the area and could get me out if the weather turned or if I twisted an ankle on loose scree. I hired Grant Sullivan based on a recommendation from a ranger I knew. Grant was 52, lean and weather-beaten, with the kind of face that looked like it had been carved out of the same granite as the peaks he guided people through. He'd been working the backcountry for 30 years, first as a hunting guide, then branching out into photo trips and wilderness skills courses. He didn't talk much. He didn't need to. Everything about the way he moved told you he knew what he was doing. We met at a trailhead south of the east entrance to Yellowstone at 5 a.m. on October 23rd. The parking area was empty, except for his white Ford F-250 with a horse trailer hitched behind it. 2 geldings stood inside the trailer, their breath steaming in the cold air. The temperature was hovering around 20 degrees. The sky was that deep blue-black you only get right before dawn in the high country, with stars still visible overhead and the first hint of gray bleeding into the eastern horizon. I stepped out of my Jeep and felt the cold hit me like a wall. My breath came out in thick clouds. The air smelled like pine and frost, and something metallic that always sits in the mountains when the temperature drops below freezing. I pulled my jacket tighter and walked over to where Grant was unloading gear from the bed of his truck. "Morning," he said without looking up. His voice was rough, like he hadn't used it much yet that day. "Morning. Weather's supposed to hold for the next 3 days. After that, there's a system coming in from the west. We'll need to be out by then or we'll get snowed in." "Understood." He glanced at my pack, which was sitting on the ground beside my Jeep. "That everything?" "Camera gear's separate. 2 cases." He nodded. "We'll load it on the pack horse. Keep your personal gear light. We're going up high and the horses will feel it." I'd packed carefully. A sleeping bag rated to 0 degrees, a down jacket, extra base layers, a headlamp, a first aid kit, water purification tablets, and enough dehydrated meals for 5 days. My camera equipment was in 2 hard cases. One for the bodies and lenses, one for batteries, memory cards, and accessories. I'd brought 3 camera bodies, 5 lenses, and enough batteries to last a week if I was careful about keeping them warm. Grant and I worked in silence, loading the horses, checking the straps, making sure everything was balanced. The sun started to rise as we finished, turning the peaks to the east orange and pink. By the time we mounted up and started moving, it was full daylight and the temperature had climbed to maybe 25 degrees. The first few miles were easy. We followed a maintained trail that switchbacked up through dense lodgepole pine, the horses picking their way over roots and rocks without needing much guidance. I rode behind Grant, watching the way he sat in the saddle, loose and easy, like he'd been born on horseback. The forest was quiet except for the creak of leather and the soft thud of hooves on dirt. We climbed for 2 hours before the trail leveled out and opened into a broad meadow. The grass was dead and brown, flattened by early frosts. A thin layer of snow covered the ground in the shaded areas beneath the trees. Grant pulled up and dismounted, stretching his back and checking the horses. "We'll rest here for 10 minutes," he said. "Let them catch their breath." I climbed down and walked to the edge of the meadow. From here I could see the valley we'd be descending into later that day. It was a long, narrow drainage that ran north to south, flanked on both sides by steep ridges. The creek at the bottom was visible as a thin silver line cutting through the bottom. Beyond that, the mountains rose in layers, each one lighter and bluer than the last, fading into the distance. Grant came up beside me and followed my gaze. "That's where we're headed. The wolves have been denning in the upper part of the valley, near the tree line. We'll camp at the lower end tonight and push up tomorrow to get your shots." "How far?" "Another 6 miles to camp. Maybe 3 more to where the wolves are." "You've seen them?" "Seen their tracks. Haven't seen the animals themselves yet, but they're there." He pulled a thermos from his saddlebag and poured coffee into 2 metal cups. We stood there drinking it, not talking, just looking at the country. The sun was higher now, bright and cold. The sky was so clear it looked like you could see forever. That's when I first felt it. A prickling sensation at the base of my skull, like someone was watching me. I turned and scanned the tree line behind us. Nothing, just shadows and trunks and the occasional patch of snow. "You feel that?" Grant asked quietly. I looked at him. "Feel what?" "Like we're being watched." "Yeah, I do." He didn't say anything else. He just poured the rest of his coffee onto the ground, screwed the lid back on the thermos, and walked back to his horse. We mounted up and kept moving. The trail dropped into the valley through a series of steep switchbacks that had my horse leaning back on its haunches to keep from sliding. Grant led the way, calm and steady, calling out warnings when the trail got loose or narrow. By early afternoon, we'd reached the valley floor and were following the creek upstream. The water ran fast and clear over rounded stones. In the summer, this creek would be a torrent fed by snowmelt. Now, in late October, It was low enough to cross without trouble. We found a good campsite on a bench above the creek, sheltered by a stand of spruce trees. It was flat, protected from the wind, and close enough to water to be practical. Grant unpacked the horses while I set up my tent, a four-season model that could handle serious weather. He had a canvas wall tent that he could stand up in, with a wood stove for heat. He had the thing set up in 20 minutes, moving with the kind of efficiency that comes from doing the same task 1,000 times. By the time we had camp squared away, the sun was low on the western ridge. The temperature was already dropping. I could feel it in the way the air bit at my face and made my fingers stiff inside my gloves. Grant built a fire in a ring of stones and got water boiling for dinner. We ate dehydrated beef stew that tasted better than it had any right to, then sat by the fire with mugs of coffee and watched the light fade from the valley. The silence out here wasn't like silence anywhere else. It was total. No distant highway noise, no dogs barking, no planes overhead. Just the creek and the fire and the occasional rustle of wind through the trees. I could hear my own heartbeat when I focused on it. "You ever see anything strange out here?" I asked Grant. He looked at me across the fire. The flames threw shadows across his face, making his eyes hard to read. "Strange how?" "I don't know. Just things that don't fit." He was quiet for a long moment, whittling a small piece of wood with his pocket knife. The shavings curled off and fell into the dirt at his feet. Finally, he spoke. "I've been guiding in these mountains for 3 decades. I've seen a lot of things. Grizzlies where they shouldn't be. Elk acting spooked for no reason. Weather that changes so fast it's like someone flipped a switch. But yeah, I've seen things I can't explain." "Like what?" He set down the knife and the piece of wood. 5 years ago, I was up near Hawk's Rest with a couple from Denver. It was late September, just after sunset. We were sitting by the fire, same as we are now, and I saw a light moving along a ridgeline to the north. It wasn't a plane. Too slow. Wasn't a helicopter. Too quiet. It looked like a ball of white light, maybe the size of a car, and it moved in a straight line across the ridge, stopped, hovered for maybe 30 seconds, then dropped straight down behind the mountain. "What do you think it was?" "I don't think about it. Thinking doesn't change what you saw." "Did your clients see it?" "They saw it." The woman asked me what it was. I told her I didn't know. Her husband said it was probably a drone, but no drone moves like that. And no drone makes it to that altitude and back without someone noticing. I stared into the fire. "Did you report it?" "To who?" "The Forest Service. They'd write it down and forget about it. I just filed it away in my head and moved on." "But it bothered you." He looked at me. "Yeah, it bothered me, because I've spent my whole life in these mountains, and I thought I understood them. Seeing something like that makes you realize how much you don't know." We sat in silence after that. The fire burned down to coals. The stars came out, so many of them that the sky looked crowded. I could see the Milky Way stretched across the valley like a river of light. I thought about what Grant had said, about seeing things you couldn't explain, about how much we didn't know. I didn't know it then, but I was about to find out just how much. Around 10 p.m., I crawled into my tent and zipped myself into my sleeping bag. The temperature had dropped into the teens. I could hear the creek running and the wind moving through the trees. I lay there with my eyes closed, listening, waiting for sleep. It didn't come. Instead, around midnight, I heard something else, a low sound, almost below the threshold of hearing. It wasn't the wind, it wasn't the creek. It was something else, a hum, deep and resonant, like a generator running somewhere far away. I sat up and unzipped my tent. The valley was dark. The moon hadn't risen yet. I stepped out into the cold and stood there, breath steaming, listening. The hum was still there, faint but unmistakable, and it was coming from the east, from the direction of the ridgeline that rose above the far side of the valley. I walked over to Grant's tent and tapped on the canvas. "Grant, you awake?" His voice came back immediately. "Yeah." "You hear that?" "I hear it." He unzipped his tent and stepped out, wearing a down jacket over his long underwear. We stood there together, not talking, just listening. The hum grew louder, not by much, but enough to be sure it wasn't my imagination. It made my teeth buzz. I could feel it in my chest, like a subsonic pressure wave pushing through the air. "What is that?" I whispered. "I don't know." Then I saw it, a light rising from behind the eastern ridge. It climbed slowly, steadily, until it cleared the skyline and hung there against the stars. It was pale and blue, the color of ice under moonlight, and it didn't flicker or waver. It just sat there, perfectly still. Grant reached back into his tent and grabbed his binoculars. He raised them, focused, then handed them to me without a word. Through the glass, the light resolved into a sphere. It was perfectly round, with a surface that looked metallic, like brushed steel. It rotated slowly on an invisible axis. There were no seams, no windows, no visible means of propulsion. Just a smooth, featureless sphere hanging in the sky above a mountain ridge. I lowered the binoculars. My hands were shaking. "What the hell is that?" "I don't know." The sphere held its position for maybe 2 minutes. Then it moved. It slid east along the ridgeline, smooth and precise, like it was on rails. It traveled a 1/4 mile in seconds, then stopped again. The movement was so controlled, so deliberate, that it couldn't have been anything natural. "That's not a drone," I said. "No." The sphere hovered for another minute, then descended. It dropped straight down behind the ridge and disappeared. The hum stopped. The night went silent again, so silent that the absence of sound felt like a physical thing pressing against my ears. Grant and I stood there, not moving, not speaking. After a long time, he said, "You should get your camera ready. If it comes back, you'll want to document it." I nodded and went to my tent. I pulled out one of my camera bodies, attached a telephoto lens, and set it on a tripod near the fire ring. I checked the settings: high ISO, fast shutter speed, manual focus. I didn't know what I was going to photograph, but I wanted to be ready. We sat by the dead fire and waited. The moon rose, casting pale light across the valley. The temperature dropped further. My toes started to go numb inside my boots. At 2 a.m., the sphere returned. It rose from the same spot, climbed to the same altitude, and held. But this time something was different. Below it, on the ridge itself, I could see movement. Small shapes, dark against the lighter rock, moving in a line. I grabbed the binoculars and focused on them. There were 3 of them, walking single file along a narrow shelf of rock. They weren't animals. Animals don't move in perfect formation. And they weren't people. The proportions were wrong. Too thin, too tall, with limbs that moved in ways that looked unnatural. "Grant," I said quietly, "look at the ridge. Below the sphere." He took the binoculars and focused. I watched his face go pale in the moonlight. "What are those?" he asked. "I don't know." The 3 shapes reached a flat area on the ridge and stopped. They stood there, motionless, for maybe 10 seconds. Then they turned in unison and faced our direction. Even from a mile away, I could feel them looking at us. The sphere pulsed. The light shifted from pale blue to white, bright and harsh, and the entire ridgeline lit up like midday. I could see every detail, the rocks, the sparse vegetation, the 3 figures standing perfectly still. Then my camera died. The LED screen went dark. The battery indicator showed full, but the camera wouldn't respond. I tried the power switch. Nothing. "My camera's dead," I said. Grant pulled out his handheld GPS unit. The screen was blank. He pressed buttons. Nothing happened. The white light held for 3 seconds, then snapped off. The sphere returned to its pale blue color. The 3 figures were gone. Just gone. Like they'd never been there. My camera came back on. The GPS unit flickered to life. Everything worked again, like nothing had happened. The sphere descended behind the ridge. The hum faded. The valley went dark and silent. Grant and I looked at each other. Neither of us said anything. What was there to say? We sat there until dawn, watching the ridge, waiting to see if it would come back. It didn't. As the sky turned gray and the sun began to rise, we finally moved. We banked the fire, packed our gear, and decided to check the ridge. The climb to the ridge took us 3 hours. We left the horses at camp and went on foot, carrying day packs with water, first aid supplies, and my camera gear. The terrain was steep and loose, a mix of scree and exposed rock that made every step feel uncertain. Grant led the way, picking a route that zigzagged up the slope, using game trails where he could find them. By the time we reached the shelf where I'd seen the 3 figures, the sun was high and bright. The temperature had climbed into the 40s. I was sweating under my jacket despite the cold air. The shelf was narrow, maybe 10 feet wide, running along the face of the ridge like a scar. The rock was pale granite, worn smooth by wind and weather. Grant knelt and examined the surface. "Anything?" I asked. "No tracks, no marks, nothing." I took photos anyway, documenting the location, the angle, the view back down to our camp. Through my telephoto lens, I could see our tents, small and insignificant against the massive scale of the valley. We walked along the shelf for maybe 200 yards, checking every section. The rock was bare. There were no footprints, no disturbances, no sign that anything had walked here recently. It was like the figures I'd seen had been ghosts, except ghosts don't move in formation. Ghosts don't turn and look at you. "We should check the area where the sphere was hovering," Grant said. "Up above." We climbed higher, scrambling over loose rock and pulling ourselves up on ledges. The ridge rose steeply here, nearly vertical in places. My lungs burned with the effort. At 10,000 feet, the air was thin enough to make every breath feel insufficient. We reached the crest of the ridge and stopped. The view from here was staggering. To the west, we could see the valley we'd camped in, the creek winding through the bottom like a thread. To the east, another valley opened up, even more remote, with no trails and no signs of human presence. The mountains beyond were endless, layer after layer of granite and snow fading into blue distance. But what caught my attention was the ground at our feet. In a small clearing between rocks, the soil had changed. It was darker than the surrounding dirt, almost black, and it had a fine, powdery texture. I knelt and touched it with my gloved hand. It was warm. Not hot, but noticeably warmer than it should have been. "Grant," I said. He came over and crouched beside me. He pulled off his glove and touched the soil with his bare hand, then pulled back quickly. "That's not right. It's got to be 20 degrees warmer than ambient temperature." I pulled out a Ziploc bag from my pack and collected a sample. The soil felt strange, lighter than normal dirt, almost like ash, but without the smell of burning. When I sealed the bag, I noticed a faint smell lingering on my glove, metallic, sharp, like copper and electricity. Grant stood and scanned the area with his binoculars. "There's another one. Over there." He pointed to a spot about 50 yards away. We walked over and found the same thing. Dark soil, powdery texture, residual warmth. I collected another sample. "Whatever was here, it touched down in at least 2 places," I said. "Or it took samples." "Samples of what?" "Earth, rock, I don't know. But look at this." He knelt and pointed to the edge of the dark soil. "The boundary is perfect. It's not like something burned this area or disturbed it. It's like something extracted material from a specific radius and left everything else untouched." He was right. The circle of dark soil had edges so precise they looked machined. There was no gradual transition from dark to light. Just a clean line where one ended and the other began. We documented both sites, taking photos, GPS coordinates, and measurements. The circles were identical in size, roughly 6 feet in diameter. They were spaced exactly 50 yards apart, forming a line that ran north to south along the ridge. "This is deliberate," Grant said. "This isn't random." "What do you think they were doing?" I think they were collecting data, or resources, something systematic." I thought about the 3 figures I'd seen, the way they'd moved in formation, the way they'd stopped and turned in unison. They knew we were watching. Yeah, they knew. We started the descent back to camp. The climb down was harder than the climb up, requiring constant attention to foot placement and balance. By the time we reached the valley floor, the sun was starting to set and the temperature was dropping fast. Back at camp, I downloaded the photos from my camera onto my laptop. The images were clear. The sphere hanging above the ridge, the white flash when it had pulsed. The view of the ridgeline with the 3 figures visible as dark shapes against the rock. Grant cooked dinner while I went through the photos. We ate in silence, both of us processing what we'd seen and found. "What are you going to do with those?" he asked finally. "I don't know yet. Part of me wants to show them to someone. Get answers. And the other part? The other part is afraid of what those answers might be." He nodded. "I've been thinking about what you asked last night, about whether I'd seen anything strange out here. The truth is, I've heard stories for years. Hunters who've seen lights they couldn't explain. Hikers who found circles in the dirt that didn't make sense. A couple of Forest Service guys who swear they saw something hovering over a lake near the Montana border. Why don't more people talk about it? Because they don't want to sound crazy. And because most people would rather not think about the possibility that there's something out here we don't understand." I saved the photos to multiple drives and closed my laptop. The fire was burning low. The stars were coming out. I stood and walked to the edge of camp, looking east toward the ridge. "Do you think they'll come back?" I asked. "I think they're still here," Grant said. "I think they've been here for a long time. We're just now paying attention." That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in my tent with my camera beside me, listening to every sound. The creek, the wind, the crackle of the fire dying outside. Around 3 a.m., I heard the hum again. Low, distant, barely audible. I sat up and reached for my camera, but before I could unzip the tent, the hum stopped. I waited, heart pounding, but nothing else happened. The valley stayed dark and quiet. Eventually, I lay back down and stared at the ceiling of my tent until dawn. The next day, we packed up camp and started back toward the trailhead. The plan had been to spend another 2 days tracking the wolves, but neither of us wanted to stay. The assignment could wait. This couldn't. As we descended the valley, I kept looking back, scanning the ridgeline, waiting to see if the sphere would appear in daylight. It didn't, but the feeling of being watched never went away. It followed us all the way down the mountain, a prickling sensation at the base of my skull that made me glance over my shoulder every few minutes. We reached the trailhead late in the afternoon. Grant loaded the horses while I transferred my gear to my Jeep. Before I left, he handed me a piece of paper with his phone number written on it. "If you go back out there, call me first," he said. "Don't go alone." "I won't. And Lena, be careful who you show those photos to. Not everyone is going to believe you, and some people might believe you for the wrong reasons." I nodded and drove back to Jackson. The trip took 2 hours. I spent the whole drive thinking about what I'd seen. The sphere, the figures, the dark circles of soil. None of it fit into any framework I had for understanding the world. When I got home, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and went through the photos again. They were real, undoctored. I had the raw files, the metadata, the GPS coordinates. I had physical evidence in the form of the soil samples. I had a witness in Grant. But I also had questions. What were those things? Where did they come from? What were they doing on that ridge? I needed answers, and I knew exactly who to call. Dr. Sarah Brennan was a physicist I'd worked with 5 years earlier on a project involving GPS collars for tracking grizzly bears. She worked at the University of Wyoming in Laramie, specializing in geophysics and remote sensing. She was smart, pragmatic, and, most importantly, she didn't dismiss things just because they seemed impossible. I called her the next morning. "Lena," she said when she picked up, "it's been forever. How are you?" "I'm good. Listen, I need your help with something. It's complicated." "Complicated how? I'd rather show you than explain over the phone." "Can I send you some photos?" "Sure. What am I looking at?" "Just look at them first, then call me back." I sent her a selection of the best images. The sphere, the white flash, the ridge with the figures. I waited, pacing my kitchen, drinking coffee that had gone cold. 25 minutes later, my phone rang. "Where did you take these?" Her voice was tight, controlled. "Absaroka backcountry, 3 nights ago. And you're absolutely certain they haven't been edited or manipulated in any way?" "I have the raw files. I have a witness who saw everything I saw, and I have physical evidence." There was a long silence. "What kind of physical evidence?" "Soil samples from the location where the object appeared to touch down. The soil has been altered. It's warmer than ambient temperature and has a different composition than the surrounding area." "Lena, do you understand what you're telling me?" "I think I do. You're telling me you witnessed and documented an unidentified aerial phenomenon with ground traces and physical evidence." "Yes." Another silence. "I need to see everything. The raw files, the soil samples, all of it. And I need to hear the full story. Can you come to Laramie?" "When?" "As soon as possible." I drove to Laramie the next day, a 4-hour trip through high plains and rolling hills. I brought my laptop, the soil samples sealed in evidence bags, and a notebook where I'd written down everything I could remember about the encounter. Every detail, every timestamp, every observation. Dr. Brennan met me at her lab, a squat concrete building on the edge of campus filled with equipment I didn't recognize, and computers running analysis programs that displayed graphs and data streams I couldn't interpret. She was in her mid-40s, with short gray hair cut in a practical style, and sharp green eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses that seemed to see through everything. She shook my hand firmly and led me to her office. A small room with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and a desk covered in papers and scientific journals. "Show me everything," she said, gesturing to a chair. I spent the next 2 hours walking her through it. the initial sighting of the sphere hovering above the ridge, the way it moved with impossible precision and control. The three figures we'd seen on the shelf below, moving in perfect formation. The white flash that had killed our electronics. The dark circles of soil we'd found the next morning. She listened without interrupting, taking notes in a leather-bound notebook, occasionally asking for clarification on timing or distances or technical details about my camera settings. When I finished, she opened my laptop and went through the photos one by one, examining the metadata, checking the timestamps against my verbal account, analyzing the image quality and looking for any signs of compression artifacts or digital manipulation. She pulled up the raw files and zoomed in on specific sections, studying the sphere's surface, the way light reflected off it, the shadows cast by the figures on the ridge. "These are clean," she said finally, closing the laptop and removing her glasses to rub her eyes. "No signs of digital editing. The metadata matches your story perfectly. These were taken with your camera, at the exact times and locations you specified, with settings consistent with low-light photography in a wilderness environment. What about the soil samples?" She stood and walked to a metal cabinet against the wall, pulling out test tubes, a small scale, and various pieces of analysis equipment I couldn't name. "Let's find out." She took one of the samples and began running it through a series of tests. I watched as she worked, methodical and precise, weighing the soil, examining it under a microscope, running it through machines that beeped and displayed numbers on small screens. She made notes on her tablet, cross-referencing with databases on her computer. After more than an hour of this, she sat down and looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "The isotopic composition is anomalous," she said carefully. "There are trace elements that don't match the surrounding geology. I'd need to do a full spectroscopic analysis to identify them precisely. But based on these preliminary results, they shouldn't be there." "What does that mean?" "It means the soil has been exposed to something that altered its molecular structure, and there's clear evidence of exposure to extreme heat. Brief, localized, and intensely focused." "How intense?" "Based on the mineral transformations I'm seeing, we're talking temperatures in excess of 2,000 degrees Celsius, applied in a focused manner for less than a second. Long enough to cause structural changes, but not long enough to cause combustion or significant thermal spread to surrounding material." I felt my chest tighten. What could do that? Nothing I'm aware of. Industrial lasers can generate that kind of heat, but they would leave different trace signatures, different patterns of thermal damage. This is something else. Something more controlled, more precise than anything in our current technological arsenal. "So you're saying," she held up a hand, "I'm saying this is real. Whatever you saw, whatever you documented, it's not conventional. It's not any human technology that I'm familiar with, at least not anything that's publicly acknowledged or commercially available. So, what is it?" She put her glasses back on and looked at me directly. "I don't know, but I know someone who might be able to help. Dr. Raymond Foster. He works with SETI, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, and specializes in astrobiology and the analysis of potential non-terrestrial phenomena. He spent years collecting data on unexplained sightings and anomalous physical evidence. More importantly, he's discreet. You can trust him." "SETI?" I felt my stomach drop. "You think this is extraterrestrial?" "I think it's non-human. Whether that means extraterrestrial, interdimensional, or something else we don't even have words for yet, I honestly can't say. But Ray has been collecting data on similar phenomena for decades. If anyone can help you understand what you witnessed, it's him." She made a call while I sat there, trying to process what she was telling me. I heard her explain the situation in careful, technical language, describing the photographs, the soil analysis, the behavior of the object and the figures. When she hung up, she looked at me. "He wants to meet with you. Tomorrow morning, if that works for you." "Where?" "His office. Here in Laramie. I'll text you the address." I stayed in a motel that night, a cheap place on the edge of town with thin walls and a heater that rattled. I didn't sleep much. I kept thinking about what Dr. Brennan had said. Non-human technology, extreme heat, isotopic anomalies that shouldn't exist. Every rational explanation I tried to construct fell apart under the weight of the evidence. The next morning, I met Dr. Raymond Foster at his office on campus, in a different building from Dr. Brennan's lab. His office was on the 3rd floor, down a narrow hallway that smelled like old books and floor wax. He was in his mid-60s, with white hair that still had traces of red in it, and a calm, measured demeanor that immediately put me at ease. His office was cluttered with books stacked on every available surface, star charts pinned to the walls, and framed photographs of radio telescopes scattered among the bookshelves. He shook my hand with a firm grip and gestured to a comfortable chair opposite his desk. "Dr. Brennan sent me your photos," he said, sitting down and pulling up files on his computer. "And she briefed me on the soil analysis. I've been studying phenomena like this for more than 20 years. What you experienced and documented is extremely significant." Significant how? Because it's consistent with a pattern I've been tracking. Over the past decade, there have been similar sightings across Wyoming, Montana, Idaho, and northern Colorado. Spherical objects displaying impossible flight characteristics. Unexplained lights that move with purpose and precision. Ground traces with anomalous soil composition. The vast majority go unreported because the witnesses don't know who to tell, or because they're afraid of being dismissed or ridiculed. How many sightings are we talking about? At least 40 that I'm personally aware of and have been able to document to some degree. Probably many more that never got reported to anyone who took them seriously. What do you think they are? He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled under his chin. Based on the behavior patterns, the systematic nature of the sightings, and the physical evidence, I think they're probes. Automated reconnaissance systems conducting some kind of survey or data collection operation. The precision of their movements, the methodical way they sample specific locations, the apparent lack of aggressive behavior, it all points to scientific observation rather than exploration or any kind of hostile intent. Probes from where? That's the fundamental question, isn't it? If they're extraterrestrial, they could be from anywhere in the galaxy or even beyond. If they're interdimensional, operating from a parallel reality or alternate plane of existence, then they could be from right here, just in a way we don't have the physics to describe or understand yet. The truth is, we don't know. And we may never know unless they choose to make direct contact and explain themselves. They already made contact. Those figures on the ridge, they turned and looked directly at us. They knew we were there. They acknowledged our presence. He nodded slowly. Yes, and that's actually one of the most important aspects of your account. It demonstrates that they're not just passively observing the planet and its geological features. They're aware of us. They're tracking human activity. They know when they're being watched. I felt a chill run down my spine, despite the warmth of the office. So, what do I do? You continue documenting, if you're willing. If you see them again, record everything you possibly can. But approach it carefully. Don't try to get too close. Don't attempt direct communication unless they clearly initiate contact first. We don't fully understand their intentions, and we don't know how they might respond to what they perceive as interference or aggression. Do you think they're dangerous? I think they're unknown. And the unknown should always be treated with appropriate caution until we understand more. They haven't shown any overt aggression in any of the documented cases I'm aware of. But that doesn't necessarily mean they're benign, and it doesn't mean they couldn't become dangerous if they felt threatened, or if we inadvertently violated some boundary or protocol we don't understand. He pulled up a map on his computer, a topographical overlay of the four-state region, showing the locations of documented sightings as red dots scattered across the terrain. They clustered in specific areas, mostly in remote mountain regions far from towns and major roads. There's definitely a pattern here, he said, pointing to the clusters with his finger. They're focusing on areas with specific geological characteristics: granite formations, high elevations, proximity to glacial valleys and ancient drainage systems. I don't know why these features are significant to them, but there's clearly a deliberate selection process at work. The valley where I saw them matches that description perfectly. Exactly. Which means there's a reasonable probability they'll return to that location. These aren't random encounters. They're revisiting specific sites, sometimes multiple times over the course of months or years. If they do return, and if you're there to witness it with proper documentation equipment, you could provide critical data that might help us understand what they're actually doing and why. You want me to go back? I'm not telling you what to do. That has to be your decision. But if you do decide to go back, I'd like you to consider taking some additional scientific equipment beyond just cameras. Ground-penetrating radar to scan for subsurface anomalies. A spectrum analyzer to detect electromagnetic emissions. High-speed video cameras that can capture details the human eye might miss. I can provide all of this equipment if you're willing to use it. I thought about it. Part of me wanted to walk away completely, to never set foot in that valley again. To forget everything I'd seen and go back to photographing wolves and grizzlies like I'd planned. But another part of me, the part that had spent 15 years chasing difficult shots in dangerous conditions, the part that needed to understand things rather than just accepting them, couldn't let it go. I'll think about it, I said. Fair enough. In the meantime, I'd like to keep these soil samples for more detailed analysis. Dr. Brennan's preliminary work is excellent, but we have access to equipment here that can tell us more. Isotopic dating, spectroscopic analysis, comparison with samples from other documented sites. Would that be all right? Yes, absolutely. Good. And Lena, he looked at me seriously. Thank you for being willing to share this, for not dismissing what you saw or convincing yourself it was something mundane. Science advances when people pay attention to anomalies rather than explaining them away. You may have documented something that changes our understanding of our place in the universe. I drove back to Jackson with my mind spinning in circles. Everything Dr. Foster had said made logical sense, but it also made everything infinitely more complicated and unsettling. If what I'd seen was part of a larger pattern, if there were 40 or more similar sightings across the region, if this had been going on for years without public acknowledgement, then this wasn't an isolated incident or a one-time anomaly. It was something ongoing, something systematic, something that suggested a purpose and intelligence behind it. And they knew we were watching them. I spent the next 2 weeks trying to focus on normal work, trying to convince myself I was done with the valley and ready to move on. I edited photos from previous assignments for the magazine. I worked on a small project documenting bighorn sheep in the Wind River Range. I met with an editor in town to discuss future assignments, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. Every quiet moment my mind went back to that night. The sphere hovering above the ridge, the 3 figures moving in perfect formation, the white flash that had simultaneously killed and recorded, the dark circles of warm soil that shouldn't exist. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw it. Grant called me in early November. His voice on the phone was tight and controlled, the way people sound when they're trying to stay calm about something that's shaken them. "I saw it again," he said without preamble. My stomach dropped. "Where?" "Different location. North of Hawk's Rest, maybe 15 miles from where we camped. I was guiding a hunter up there, elk season, and we saw a light moving along a ridge at dusk. Same basic behavior as before. It moved in a perfectly straight line parallel to the ridge, stopped and hovered for maybe a minute, then dropped vertically behind the mountain and didn't come back." "Did you get close enough to see details?" "No. The hunter saw it too and asked me what it was. I told him honestly that I didn't know. He suggested it was probably a drone and then went back to glassing for elk. I don't think he gave it another thought. But I know what I saw, Lena. It was the same thing." "Did you document it?" "I took a few photos with my phone, but the distance was too great and the light was fading. They're not as clear as yours, but I marked the GPS coordinates and the exact time." I was quiet for a moment, thinking. "Grant, do you think they're following a specific route, like they're systematically surveying different areas?" "Could be. Dr. Foster's theory about them working a pattern makes sense. If they're collecting data or samples, they'd want to cover the region methodically, right? Check different valleys, different elevations, different geological formations. Which means they'll probably come back to our valley eventually. That's what I'm thinking. And Lena..." He paused. "I think we should be there when they do. With proper equipment this time. Real documentation that can't be dismissed." I'd been thinking the same thing, but hearing him say it made it real. Made it a decision I had to actually make rather than just a possibility I was considering. "Early December," I said. "Before the heavy snows close the high passes and make it impossible to get in. Will you come with me?" There was a pause, and I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line. "Yeah, I'll come. But we do this smart, Lena. We bring the right gear. We maintain a safe distance. And if things start to feel wrong, if we get any sense that we're in danger, we leave immediately. No heroics, no unnecessary risks." "Agreed. And we bring communication equipment. Satellite phone at minimum. If something goes wrong, I want to be able to call for help. I'll take care of it." We spent the next 3 weeks planning meticulously. I contacted Dr. Foster and asked about the equipment he'd mentioned. He drove up to Jackson personally with 3 large equipment cases carefully packed with foam padding. We met at my cabin, and he spent an entire afternoon showing me how to use everything. A portable spectrum analyzer that could detect electromagnetic emissions across multiple frequencies. A high-speed camera system capable of shooting 1,000 frames per second, which would capture details invisible to normal video. Ground-penetrating radar that could scan subsurface features up to 30 feet deep. A set of sensitive radiation detectors. And a sophisticated device he called a broad-spectrum recorder that could simultaneously capture radio signals, electromagnetic pulses, and audio across an enormous range of frequencies. If they emit anything, light, heat, radio waves, magnetic fields, or anything else on the electromagnetic spectrum, this equipment will detect and record it, he explained, showing me how to calibrate each device. The key is to set everything up before they arrive and let it run automatically. Don't try to interact or interfere. Just observe and record. Let the instruments do their job. What if they try to communicate directly? Then let the recorder capture it. Don't respond unless you're absolutely certain it's safe, and unless the communication seems explicitly designed to elicit a response. We have no idea what their communication protocols are or how they might interpret attempts at contact. He showed me how to use each piece of equipment, walking me through the settings, the calibration procedures, the ways to maximize battery life in cold conditions. It took hours to go through everything thoroughly. When we finally finished, he looked at me with an expression that was half concern, half excitement. "Lena, I need you to understand something important. What you're doing here, what you're attempting to do, it's significant. It could genuinely help us understand one of the most profound questions humanity has ever faced. Are we alone in the universe? If we're not alone, who else is out there and what do they want? But it's also potentially risky. We don't know how they'll respond to being observed with this level of sophisticated equipment. We don't know if they'll perceive it as hostile or invasive. Please be careful." "I will. I promise." "Good." He loaded the empty cases back into his truck. "Call me the moment you get back. I don't care what time it is. I want to know what you found." He left, and I spent the rest of the evening organizing and packing the equipment carefully, making sure I understood how everything worked. Grant and I had agreed to leave on December 7th. That gave me a week to prepare, to gather supplies, to make sure I had everything we'd need for what might turn into a much longer trip than the first one. The night before we left, I had another dream. The same dream as before, or close enough. I was standing alone in the valley at night, under a sky so crowded with stars, it looked like clouds of light. Then one of the stars detached itself and descended slowly toward me. It grew larger as it approached, resolving into the familiar sphere, rotating with that same impossible smoothness. It stopped a few feet above my head and hovered there, perfectly silent and motionless. I could see my own reflection on its surface, distorted and strange, like looking at myself in a funhouse mirror. Then something changed. The sphere pulsed once, and suddenly I wasn't seeing my reflection anymore. I was seeing something else. Landscapes I didn't recognize, geometries that didn't make sense, colors that shouldn't exist, and underneath it all, a sense of vast intelligence, vast purpose, vast time. A question, without words, pressed into my consciousness. Too complex for language, too alien for direct understanding. Then I woke up, heart pounding, sheets soaked with sweat, trying desperately to hold on to the details of the dream before they faded like smoke. But they were already slipping away, leaving behind only a profound sense of being observed, evaluated, measured against some incomprehensible standard. I sat in bed in the darkness, listening to my own breathing, and wondered if I was making a terrible mistake. But I knew I was going back anyway. December 7th arrived cold and clear. Grant and I met at the same trailhead at dawn, the temperature hovering just above zero, our breath creating clouds of vapor in the still air. Fresh snow covered everything, at least 8 inches of it, maybe more in the drifts. More snow was forecast for later in the week, but for now, the sky was that deep, crystalline blue that only comes in the high country in winter. We loaded the horses carefully with all the gear, the camping equipment, food supplies, my camera equipment, and all of Dr. Foster's scientific instruments. The horses struggled a bit with the footing on the snowy trail, but Grant had brought experienced animals that knew how to handle winter conditions. We moved slowly, carefully, stopping frequently to rest the horses and to check our surroundings. The climb took longer than it had in October. The snow slowed us significantly, and we had to navigate around sections where the trail had become treacherous with ice. By the time we reached the valley, it was late afternoon, and the light was already starting to fade. Long shadows stretched across the snow, turning it blue in the places where the sun couldn't reach. We set up camp in the same location as before, on the bench above the creek. Grant got the wall tent erected and the wood stove burning while I carefully unpacked all the scientific equipment and began the process of setting it up according to Dr. Foster's detailed instructions. The cameras needed clear, unobstructed sight lines to the ridge where we'd seen the sphere. The spectrum analyzer needed to be positioned away from any significant metal objects that might interfere with its readings. The ground-penetrating radar needed stable, level ground for accurate subsurface mapping. It took me more than 2 hours to get everything positioned correctly, calibrated, and running. Each device hummed quietly, recording ambient baseline levels, waiting patiently for something anomalous to detect. I checked each one multiple times to make sure it was functioning properly, that the batteries were fully charged, that the data storage had plenty of capacity. By the time I finished, it was fully dark. Grant had dinner ready. More of the dehydrated meals that tasted better than they should, probably because we were burning so many calories in the cold. We ate in relative silence, the tension between us palpable. We both knew what we were here for. We both knew that if the sphere came back, this time we'd have comprehensive data, real evidence that couldn't be easily dismissed or explained away. "How long do we wait?" Grant asked, scraping the last of his meal from his bowl. 3 nights minimum. If nothing happens after that, we pack up and leave. I promised Dr. Foster I wouldn't take unnecessary risks. And if something does happen? We document everything. We let the equipment do its job. And then we decide whether to stay longer or whether we've gotten what we came for. He nodded, setting his bowl aside. Fair enough. We sat by the fire for a while, not talking much, just watching the flames and listening to the night sounds. The creek was quieter than it had been in October, partially frozen, the water moving sluggishly beneath a skin of ice. The wind moved through the spruce trees with a sound like distant whispers. The valley felt different in winter. Colder, obviously, but also more remote, more isolated, more alien. At 11:47 p.m., I remember the time exactly because I checked my watch when it started. The spectrum analyzer began beeping, a rapid series of tones that cut through the quiet night like an alarm. I scrambled to the device and checked the display. It was detecting strong electromagnetic activity in the upper frequency ranges, the signal coming from due east. The readings were spiking higher than the baseline levels, climbing steadily as whatever was generating the signal got closer or intensified. "It's here," I said, my voice sounding strange in my own ears. Grant stood immediately, grabbing his binoculars from inside his tent. We both turned toward the eastern ridge, hearts pounding, breath visible in the cold air. The sphere rose from behind the ridge exactly as it had before. The same deliberate ascent, the same impossible smoothness of motion. It climbed slowly until it cleared the skyline, then stopped and hovered, rotating with that hypnotic precision. The surface was the same pale blue color I remembered, like ice lit from within, catching and reflecting the starlight in ways that didn't quite make sense. The high-speed camera system activated automatically, triggered by the motion detection algorithms I'd programmed into it. I could hear the faint whir of the camera mechanism as it began recording at 1,000 frames per second, capturing every microsecond of movement in excruciating detail. The spectrum analyzer continued its steady beeping, the display showing massive spikes across multiple frequency bands. I checked the radiation detector. Background levels only. Whatever the sphere was made of, whatever was powering it, it wasn't generating ionizing radiation that our instruments could detect. The sphere began moving, drifting west along the ridgeline, following almost exactly the same path it had taken during our first encounter. The movement was so precise it looked mechanical, automated, like a machine following programmed instructions. Then it stopped, hovering directly above the area where we'd found the dark circles of altered soil. The hum started. That same low, subsonic vibration that you felt more than heard, that made your teeth buzz and your chest vibrate and your inner ear feel strange. The broad-spectrum recorder's display lit up with activity, capturing frequencies across the entire electromagnetic spectrum. Then the sphere changed. The pale blue light shifted to brilliant white, harsh and intense. A column of pure light dropped from the sphere to the ground below, solid and defined like a pillar of frozen energy. Where the column touched, the snow instantly vaporized. Not melted, vaporized. Steam rose into the cold air in thick clouds, and through it I could see the ground beneath glowing orange, then white, then fading to black. The ground-penetrating radar display went crazy, showing massive disturbances in the subsurface structure, as if something was being extracted or analyzed at depths far below the surface. The column held for exactly 5 seconds. I counted them, feeling each second stretch out impossibly long. Then it retracted smoothly, pulling back up into the sphere like water being sucked through a straw. The sphere rose slightly and drifted precisely 50 yards to the north. Another column dropped. Same process. 5 seconds, retract, move. It's working a grid, Grant whispered beside me. It's systematically covering the entire area. He was right. The sphere continued this pattern for more than 20 minutes, dropping columns at regular intervals, covering ground in a methodical pattern that suggested planning, purpose, intelligence. Each time a column touched down, the spectrum analyzer spiked. The ground-penetrating radar showed those disturbing subsurface anomalies, and the high-speed camera captured every fraction of a second of the process. Then something new happened. Something we hadn't seen before. The sphere stopped moving and hovered in place for maybe 30 seconds. Then 3 smaller lights detached from it, separating smoothly and dropping to the ridge below. These weren't spheres. They were different, elongated. Bars or rods of light, horizontal rather than vertical, each maybe 6 feet long and perfectly straight. They moved independently across the ridge in a clearly coordinated pattern, sweeping back and forth methodically like they were scanning the ground in systematic passes. The spectrum analyzer was registering multiple distinct signals now, tracking each light source separately. Grant raised his thermal scope with shaking hands. I'm getting heat signatures, distinct thermal readings from each one. Whatever those things are, they're generating significant heat. Do you see anything else? Any figures like before, any physical forms? No, just the lights themselves. But the pattern is deliberate. This isn't random movement. They're covering ground in overlapping search patterns, like they're looking for something specific, or mapping something in detail. The 3 bar-shaped lights worked the ridge for another 10 minutes, their movements synchronized with eerie precision. Then, as one, they rose vertically and merged back into the larger sphere, disappearing into it as smoothly as they'd emerged. The sphere climbed higher, drifted east, and descended behind the ridge in that same controlled drop. The hum stopped abruptly, cutting off mid-note. The valley went dark and silent, the absence of sound so complete it felt like pressure against my eardrums. I ran to the equipment on shaking legs. Everything was still recording, all the instruments still capturing data. I checked readout after readout. The spectrum analyzer had logged massive electromagnetic spikes during each column deployment, far beyond anything that could be explained by natural phenomena. The high-speed camera had captured thousands upon thousands of frames of clear, detailed footage. The ground-penetrating radar showed distinct subsurface disturbances, voids, and density changes that hadn't been there before the sphere arrived. The broad-spectrum recorder had captured audio and electromagnetic signals across dozens of frequency bands. "We got it," I said, my voice coming out hoarse. "We documented everything. Multiple instruments, multiple types of data. This is irrefutable." Grant walked over and looked at the equipment displays, his face pale in the dim glow of the screens. "Now what?" "Now we wait and see if they come back tonight." We didn't have to wait long. At 1:15 a.m., the spectrum analyzer started beeping again. Different pattern this time. More intense. More urgent somehow. The sphere rose from behind the ridge, but this time it didn't follow the same pattern. Instead of drifting west along the ridgeline, it came directly toward us, moving slowly but deliberately across the valley. I felt my heart start to hammer. "Grant, I see it." The sphere crossed the valley, covering the distance with that same impossible smoothness. It stopped approximately 200 yards from our camp and hovered there, maybe 100 feet above the ground. Close enough now that I could see details on the surface that I'd never been able to discern from a distance. The geometric patterns weren't just random designs. They were complex, mathematical, shifting and changing as the sphere rotated. The surface had depth and texture and structure that suggested purpose and function rather than just decoration. The hum intensified until I could feel it in my bones, in my teeth, in the base of my spine. The equipment was screaming now, every instrument registering off-the-scale readings, some of them flashing warnings about signal saturation. The high-speed camera continued recording, capturing every microsecond of this impossible encounter. Then my radio crackled to life. The handheld two-way radio that was sitting inside my tent, powered completely off, the battery removed for the cold. But despite being off and batteryless, it turned itself on somehow. Static poured from the speaker, harsh and loud in the cold night air, then resolved into a series of tones. High-pitched, rhythmic, repeating in a mathematical pattern that sounded almost musical. The tones lasted for maybe 15 seconds, then stopped abruptly. The radio went silent. Dead air. Then a voice came through. Distorted, layered, slightly mechanical, but still recognizable as language, as communication, as deliberate meaning. Observation noted. I felt my blood turn to ice. Beside me, Grant grabbed my arm hard enough to hurt. The voice continued, each word carefully articulated. Proximity acceptable. Continue observation. The radio clicked off. Dead silence. The sphere held its position for another long moment, rotating slowly, those complex patterns shifting across its surface like living things. Then it rose vertically at incredible speed, faster than anything I'd ever seen move, and vanished into the night sky. Within seconds it was gone completely, not even a speck of light visible against the stars. The hum stopped. Everything went silent. Normal silence. The kind you can breathe in. I stood there, unable to move, unable to process what had just happened. Grant was beside me, breathing hard, his face drained of color even in the darkness. "They talked to us," I finally managed to say. "Yeah. They know we're here. They know we're recording them, and they're—" I couldn't finish the sentence. "They're telling us to keep doing it," Grant finished for me. His voice was steady, but I could hear the tremor underneath. "They want us to observe them. They're giving us permission. Maybe they're even encouraging it." I looked at him. Why? Why would they want us to document them? I don't know, but I think we just moved from passive observers to active participants in whatever they're doing here. And Lena, I'm not sure that's a good thing. We didn't sleep. Couldn't sleep. We sat by the fire, feeding it wood, keeping it burning. both of us too wired and shaken to even consider lying down. We talked in circles, trying to make sense of what had happened, trying to understand the implications. They had acknowledged us, directly, deliberately, using our own technology to communicate. That changed everything. At first light, we packed up the equipment carefully and loaded the horses. Neither of us discussed it. We just moved, working in efficient silence, both knowing, without saying it, that we needed to get this data somewhere safe. Somewhere we could analyze it properly without feeling exposed and vulnerable on a mountain ridge. The ride out took most of the day. We pushed the horses as hard as we safely could on the snowy trail, both of us glancing back over our shoulders periodically, watching the ridges, scanning the sky. We didn't see anything, but the feeling of being watched never quite went away. It followed us like a shadow all the way down the mountain. When we finally reached the trailhead, Grant loaded the horses while I carefully secured all the equipment in my Jeep. Before I left, he handed me a piece of paper with an email address written on it. "Send me copies of everything," he said. "All the data, all the recordings, everything. If something happens to you, or if your data gets lost or stolen, I want backups that exist somewhere else." You think something might happen? I think we crossed a threshold. They acknowledged us directly. They spoke to us. That fundamentally changes the nature of this interaction. We're not just watching anymore, we're being watched back. And we're being allowed to watch. That has to mean something. I drove back to Jackson with the equipment carefully secured in the back of my Jeep. I didn't stop for food or gas or anything. I drove straight to my cabin, and carried everything inside immediately. Then I started going through the data. It took 3 full days of continuous work, barely sleeping, living on coffee and whatever food I could grab quickly. The high-speed camera had captured over 50,000 frames of crystal-clear footage, every movement, every detail, recorded at a resolution and frame rate that revealed things the human eye simply couldn't process. The spectrum analyzer had logged hundreds of distinct electromagnetic events, each one documented with precise timestamps and frequency profiles. The ground-penetrating radar showed clear, unambiguous subsurface anomalies at every location where a column had touched down. Voids, density changes, and structural disruptions that couldn't be explained by any natural process. And the broad-spectrum recorder had captured the entire audio exchange, including those mathematical tones and that voice speaking in English through a powered-off, batteryless radio. I compiled everything into a comprehensive report with timestamps, cross-references, and analysis notes. Then I sent it all to Dr. Foster via encrypted file transfer. He called me back within an hour of receiving it. "Lena," his voice was tight with barely controlled excitement. "This is extraordinary. Beyond extraordinary. The electromagnetic signatures alone represent phenomena I've never encountered in 30 years of studying this subject. And the communication, they deliberately made contact using your equipment. They identified themselves as aware of your presence and explicitly gave you permission to continue observing." "What does it mean, Ray? Why would they do that?" "It means they're aware of your presence and they've made a decision not to hide from you. Whether that's because they want to be observed, because they don't perceive you as a threat, or because they're using you as some kind of test case, a way to gauge human reactions and capabilities, I honestly can't say with certainty. Should I go back? Should I try to establish more direct contact?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear him breathing, thinking. "That's entirely your decision, and I won't make it for you. But if you do choose to go back, understand that you're moving into unprecedented territory. They know you're there. They know what you're doing. They've acknowledged it and apparently given permission. That's a form of contact, Lena. That's communication, and communication can escalate in unpredictable ways. Have you analyzed the ground-penetrating radar data yet? Yes. The subsurface disturbances are consistent with selective material extraction. They're not just collecting surface samples anymore. They're going deeper, extracting materials from 15 to 20 feet below the surface. The pattern strongly suggests they're following specific geological features. Mineral veins, perhaps, or underground water channels, or maybe structures in the bedrock itself. So, they're mining? Harvesting resources? Not mining in the industrial sense. The quantities are too small, they're sampling, taking precise amounts from very specific locations. It's research, not resource extraction. They're trying to understand Earth's composition, its structure, its history maybe. And based on the pattern of sites we've documented, they're doing it systematically across hundreds of square miles. I thought about that for a long moment. Scientific research. Systematic data collection. Dr. Foster, what do you think they ultimately want? What's the end goal of all this? I think they're trying to understand Earth at a fundamental level. Its geology, its biology, its position in space and time. And I think your encounter, the fact that they communicated with you, suggests they've decided we're worth studying as well. Not just as organisms or as part of the ecosystem, but as technological beings capable of observing and documenting them. That's significant, Lena. That suggests a level of respect or interest that goes beyond pure scientific detachment. I didn't go back to the valley that winter. The snow came hard and heavy, and the high passes closed completely, making travel into the deep backcountry impossible until spring. But I stayed in close contact with Dr. Foster, monitoring the network of sites he'd been documenting across the region. Over the next 3 months, there were 7 more confirmed sightings at different locations. Each one followed the same basic pattern: a spherical object displaying impossible flight characteristics, strong electromagnetic activity, ground traces with anomalous soil composition. The pattern was consistent, repeatable, undeniable. And at 2 of those sites, the sphere had used radio equipment. A CB radio in one case, a satellite phone in another, to send the same message. Observation noted. Continue observation. They were talking to multiple observers now, not just me. They were actively encouraging documentation across a wide area. The implications of that were staggering. In March, Dr. Foster called me with a comprehensive update. His voice carried a mixture of excitement and concern that I was starting to recognize. We've now identified 23 active sites across Wyoming, Montana, Idaho, and Colorado, all of them showing the same hexagonal grid pattern in their ground sampling. All of them with identical soil anomalies, extreme localized heat, isotopic changes, trace elements that don't match local geology. Whatever they're doing, it's large scale. It's coordinated across hundreds of miles, and it's ongoing. This isn't a temporary survey. This is a long-term research program. What happens now? We continue documenting. We continue analyzing the data. We look for patterns and try to understand their methodology and objectives. And we wait to see what they do next. Do you think they'll ever make full contact? Actually show themselves physically, explain what they're doing and why? I honestly don't know. But I think we're closer to that possibility than humanity has ever been. You opened a door, Lena. You showed them that we're capable of observing them intelligently, scientifically, without panic or aggression. They responded to that. They acknowledged it. That's communication. And communication, even limited communication, is the essential first step toward mutual understanding. It's been 8 months since that night in the valley when they spoke to me through a dead radio. 8 months since they told me to continue observing. I haven't been back to the valley yet. I've been working with Dr. Foster, analyzing data, correlating patterns, trying to understand the bigger picture of what they're doing. Grant moved to Montana and took a position with the Forest Service working on wilderness conservation. We stay in touch through email, careful encrypted messages where we never quite say directly what we're talking about. Neither of us discusses the specifics of what we saw anymore. It's always there, sitting between every line of text, but we don't put it into explicit words where someone else might read them. I still have all the original data, the photos, the high-speed video, the electromagnetic recordings, the audio capture of that voice coming through an impossible radio. I've shared it with exactly 4 people: Dr. Brennan, Dr. Foster, Grant, and one other researcher Dr. Foster trusts who's been studying similar phenomena for decades. None of them have been able to explain it using conventional science. None of them think I'm delusional or making it up. The sphere continues to appear at sites across the region. The pattern continues to expand, slowly but inexorably. There are up to 31 documented locations now, spread across 4 states, all following the same hexagonal grid structure, all showing the same physical evidence. And at 8 of those locations, they've communicated with observers using whatever electronic equipment was available. Always the same message, always those same words. Observation noted. Continue observation. They want us to watch. They want us to document. They want us to know they're here. I think about that voice on the radio sometimes, late at night when sleep won't come. The way it sounded, simultaneously mechanical and somehow alive. The way it said, proximity acceptable, like I was a variable in a vast equation they were solving. The way it commanded, continue observation, like I was being given both permission and instruction simultaneously. I think about the figures I saw on the ridge during that first encounter, the way they moved in perfect formation, the way they turned and looked directly at our camp with deliberate acknowledgement. I think about the sphere hovering 200 yards from my tent, close enough that I could see those complex geometric patterns shifting across its surface like living mathematics. And I think about the fundamental question that keeps me awake at night, the question that Dr. Foster can't answer and that Grant won't discuss. If they wanted to hide from us, they could. They clearly have the technology to avoid detection completely, to conduct their research without ever being seen. But they're not hiding. They're not avoiding us. They're deliberately letting themselves be observed. They're actively encouraging documentation and study. Why? Maybe Dr. Foster is right. Maybe they're studying us now, not just the planet. Maybe they've decided we're advanced enough, curious enough, rational enough to be worth engaging with at some minimal level. Maybe this is how first contact actually happens in reality, not with the dramatic landing and formal first contact protocols, but with the slow, gradual revelation in remote locations, where only a handful of people are paying close enough attention to notice. Or maybe we're just convenient witnesses to something much larger that we can't yet comprehend. Maybe we're not the subjects of their study at all. Maybe we're just incidental observers of a project so vast and so alien that we're struggling to understand even the tiniest fraction of what they're actually doing. I don't know the answer. But I know this with absolute certainty. We are not alone. There is something in the high country of Wyoming, Montana, Idaho, and Colorado that does not belong to our world and did not originate from human civilization. It's studying our planet with a precision and purpose that suggests intelligence far beyond ours. And it knows we're watching. It's always known. The question isn't whether they exist anymore. That question has been answered. The evidence is overwhelming. documented across multiple sites with multiple witnesses and multiple forms of data. The question now is what they want from us, and whether we're ready, as individuals and as a species, for the answer when it finally comes in full. If you're out there, in the backcountry, in those remote places where the modern world hasn't quite reached, and you see lights that don't behave like anything you recognize, document them. Take photos, record video, mark GPS coordinates, collect physical samples if you can do it safely without getting too close. But don't try to interact unless they clearly initiate contact first. Don't assume you understand their intentions, and don't think you're alone if you see something impossible. They're watching us. They've been watching for a long time. We're only just now learning to watch them back. I'm not done watching the sky. I'm not done documenting. And I'm not done asking questions. Because somewhere in those mountains, hidden in the patterns of their systematic survey, there's an answer to one of humanity's oldest questions. And I intend to be there when we finally understand what it is. Even if the answer changes everything we thought we knew about our place in the universe. Even if it means accepting that we're not the only intelligence studying this planet. Even if it means realizing we've been watched all along, and we're only now becoming aware enough to notice. The sphere will come back. They always do, and when it does, I'll be ready with cameras and instruments and questions. Because that's what they told me to do. Continue observation. And I intend to do exactly that. My name is Dylan Reeves. I'm 34 years old, and I've been working as a wildfire lookout for the U.S. Forest Service for the past 8 years. Most of that time has been spent in towers scattered across Wyoming and Montana, but for the last 3 years, I've been assigned to Sentinel Peak in the Absaroka Range, about 40 miles east of Yellowstone's east entrance. It's remote work, lonely work. You spend your days scanning the horizon for smoke, logging weather data, and talking to yourself more than you'd like to admit. Most people can't handle it for more than a season or two. I've stayed because I like the solitude, and because up here, at 9,800 feet, you can see weather systems roll in from 100 miles away and watch storms build over the mountains like watching creation itself. I thought I'd seen everything the sky could throw at me. Lightning that walked across ridgelines like living things. Lenticular clouds that looked like spacecraft. Temperature inversions that made the air shimmer and bend light in strange ways. Meteor showers so intense they looked like the stars were falling. I was wrong about having seen everything. The tower sits on a granite outcrop at the summit of Sentinel Peak. It's a standard 40-foot steel frame structure with a small enclosed cabin at the top, maybe 12 feet by 12 feet with windows on all 4 sides. I've got a cot, a small propane stove, a weather station, a radio, and enough books to get me through the lonely nights. The access road is passable maybe 6 months out of the year. The rest of the time, I'm on my own up here unless I want to hike down 5 miles of switchbacks to where I can get a cell signal. October 15th was my last scheduled week before they closed the tower for winter. The temperature was already dropping into the teens at night, and snow was forecast for the following week. I'd been planning to hike out on the 20th, load my gear into my truck, and head back to Cody for the winter. That's not what happened. On the afternoon of October 15th, I got a radio call from the regional office. A documentary filmmaker named Noel Pacheco was coming up to do a shoot about fire lookout work. She'd gotten all the permits, had approval from the Forest Service, and wanted to spend 2 nights at the tower to capture sunrise and sunset footage. The regional coordinator asked if I was okay with it. I wasn't thrilled. I'd gotten used to being alone up here. But I said yes because turning down media requests wasn't worth the bureaucratic headache. and because having another person around for a couple days might actually be a nice change. Noel arrived just before sunset, hiking up the trail with a pack that looked like it weighed as much as she did. She was maybe 30, short and compact, with dark hair pulled back in a braid and the kind of weathered face that told you she spent a lot of time outdoors. She had 2 cameras hanging from her neck and what looked like a professional video rig strapped to her pack. "Dylan?" she called up from the base of the tower. "That's me. Come on up." She climbed the wooden stairs with steady, efficient movements. When she reached the top, she set her pack down and stuck out her hand. "Noel Pacheco, thanks for letting me crash your tower." "No problem. You do a lot of mountain filming." "Enough. I did a series on backcountry rangers last year. Before that, search and rescue teams in the Tetons. I like high, remote places. They're honest." I liked her immediately. She didn't waste words, and she didn't seem like the type who'd need constant entertainment or conversation. She set up her sleeping bag in a corner of the cabin and spent the last hour of daylight doing what she called establishing shots, wide angles of the tower, the view from the catwalk, the sun dropping toward the western peaks. I watched her work. She moved with the kind of focused efficiency that comes from doing something 1,000 times. Every shot was deliberate, every angle considered. As the sun set, turning the sky orange and pink, she stood on the catwalk with her camera and filmed the light changing across the valley below. I stood beside her, not talking, just watching the same view I'd watched hundreds of times, but seeing it differently through her attention to it. "You ever see anything strange up here?" she asked, still filming. "Strange how?" "I don't know. Weird weather, unusual lights, things that don't fit." I thought about it. Sometimes you see things at this altitude that look strange until you figure out what they are. Ball lightning, sprites above thunderstorms, temperature inversions that make lights from distant towns look like they're floating in midair. But nothing you couldn't explain? Not until yesterday. She lowered her camera and looked at me. "What happened yesterday?" I hesitated. I hadn't told anyone yet because I wasn't sure how to describe it without sounding like I'd been alone in the tower too long. But something about the way she asked, direct, genuinely curious, not looking for a story but for truth, made me decide to tell her. Around 2 a.m., I woke up because the whole cabin was bright. Not like sunrise bright, brighter, like someone was shining a spotlight directly through the windows. I got up and looked out, and there was a light hovering above the ridge to the northeast. Perfectly still. Bright white, but it didn't hurt to look at. It was just there. How long did it last? Maybe 2 minutes, then it dropped straight down behind the ridge and was gone. No sound, no trail, just gone. Did you report it? No. What would I say? I saw a light that didn't behave like an aircraft? They'd probably tell me to get more sleep. She was quiet for a moment, looking out at the darkening sky. I've heard stories like that. Lights that don't fit the pattern of anything we know. Most people don't talk about them because they're afraid of sounding crazy. You believe in that kind of thing? I believe people see things they can't explain. Whether those things are what they think they are, she shrugged. That's a different question. We went back inside as full darkness settled over the mountains. I cooked a simple dinner, rice and beans, nothing fancy, and we ate while talking about her work, her other projects, the places she'd filmed. She showed me some footage from her search and rescue series on her laptop. It was good work, real, not sensationalized or dramatized, just people doing difficult jobs in hard places. Around 10 p.m., she asked if she could set up a time-lapse camera on the catwalk to capture the night sky. Sure, the view's better from the north side. less light pollution. She went out and spent 20 minutes setting up her camera, getting the angle right, programming the intervalometer. I could see her through the window, silhouetted against the stars, completely focused on her work. When she came back in, her cheeks were red from the cold. It's going to be a clear night. Should get some good star trail footage. Wind's supposed to pick up around midnight. Make sure it's secured. It is. We talked for a while longer, then she crawled into her sleeping bag and I into mine. The cabin was dark except for the faint glow from the weather station display. I lay there, listening to the wind starting to pick up, exactly as forecast, and to Noelle's breathing as she fell asleep. I didn't expect to sleep much. I never did on nights when the wind was strong, but I must have dozed off because I woke suddenly to brightness. Not the same brightness as the night before. This was different, sharper, moving. I sat up and looked out the north window. What I saw made my breath catch. There was a light in the sky, roughly where I'd seen the one the night before, but this time I could see it changing. As I watched, the single point of light began to elongate. Then it split. One light became two, then three, separating smoothly until they formed a perfect triangle in the sky. "Noelle," I said quietly. "Noelle, wake up." She stirred. "What?" "You need to see this." She was up in seconds, stumbling to the window. I heard her breath catch the same way mine had. The three lights held their triangular formation for maybe 10 seconds. Then, as smoothly as they'd separated, they began to move back together. They merged into a single point, held for a moment, then split again. This time they formed a line, perfectly straight, perfectly spaced. Then they merged again. "Is your camera still running?" I asked. "Yes, it's set to 30-second intervals. It should be capturing this." We watched for another 2 minutes as the light split and merged in different configurations. Triangle, line, triangle again. Each formation held for exactly 10 seconds before merging back into a single point. Then, without warning, the single light dropped straight down toward the ridge and disappeared behind it. No arc, no gradual descent, just straight down and gone. The night went dark again. The stars were still there, bright and clear. The wind rattled the windows. Everything was normal except for what we'd just witnessed. Noelle grabbed a flashlight and went out onto the catwalk. I followed her. She was checking her camera, making sure it was still running. "Did it get it?" I asked. "It should have. The intervalometer's still counting. We won't know for sure until I review the footage." We stood there in the cold, scanning the sky, waiting to see if it would come back. It didn't. After 20 minutes, we went back inside, both of us too wired to sleep. "What the hell was that?" Noelle asked, sitting on her sleeping bag with her jacket still on. "I don't know, but it's the second night in a row I've seen something over that ridge." "Always the same location?" "Same general area. Northeast, over that high ridge that runs toward Sunlight Basin." She pulled out a topographic map and spread it on the floor. I pointed to the ridge. She marked it with a pencil. "That's about 3 miles from here. Rough terrain. Steep on both sides. There's an old mining road that gets close to it from the east, but it's not maintained. I doubt anything's driven it in 20 years. Could we hike to it?" I looked at her. "You want to go look? Don't you?" I did, of course I did. But I also knew the terrain. It's a hard hike, 5 or 6 hours there, same back. We'd need to leave before dawn to make it there and back in daylight. I'm good with that. We spent the next hour planning the route, checking the weather forecast, clear and cold for the next 48 hours, and packing what we'd need. Water, food, first aid, extra layers, headlamps, and all of Noel's camera equipment. At 4 a.m., we gave up on trying to sleep and just started getting ready. By 5 a.m., we were heading down from the tower with headlamps on, moving carefully on the rocky trail. The hike to the ridge took us 6 hours. The terrain was everything I'd warned about. Loose scree, steep grades, sections where we had to scramble over rock using hands and feet. Noel handled it better than I expected, moving steadily without complaint, even when the climb got technical. We reached the base of the ridge around 11 a.m. The sun was high and bright, the temperature in the low 40s. The ridge rose another 500 feet above us, bare rock and sparse vegetation. We found a game trail that zigzagged up the face and followed it, stopping frequently to catch our breath in the thin air. At the top, we stopped and looked around. The view was staggering, mountains in every direction, the Absarokas stretching to the north, the wind rivers visible to the south on the clear horizon. But what caught my attention was the ground. In a small clearing near the highest point of the ridge, the earth looked disturbed. Not recently, but not that long ago either. The soil was darker than the surrounding area, and there was a faint smell in the air, metallic, sharp. Noel knelt and examined the ground. Look at this. There were marks in the soil, not footprints. 3 circular depressions, each about a foot in diameter, arranged in a triangle roughly 10 feet on each side. The edges were precise, like they'd been pressed into the ground with mechanical pressure. Something was here, I said. Something heavy. These depressions are at least 2 inches deep. She pulled out her camera and started documenting everything. Close-ups of the marks, wide shots showing their arrangement, measurements using a small tape measure she carried. I walked the perimeter of the area looking for anything else unusual. That's when I found the second site. About 50 yards away, another clearing, another triangle of depressions. Same size, same spacing, same depth. Noel, over here. She came over and saw it. Her face went pale. There's a pattern. They're positioned in a line running northeast to southwest. We walked further and found a third site. Same configuration. Same precise marks. Whatever this is, it's deliberate, Noel said. This isn't random. I pulled out my GPS unit and marked each location. The 3 sites formed a straight line running 32 degrees northeast. The spacing between them was almost exactly 50 yards. We spent another hour documenting everything, taking photos from every angle, collecting soil samples in Ziploc bags from each site. The soil had that same unusual quality at all 3 locations. Darker, finer, slightly warm to the touch, even in the cold air. What do you think they were doing? I asked. Noel lowered her camera. Collecting something, or analyzing something. This is too systematic to be anything else. As we were preparing to start the hike back, she stopped suddenly. The camera, the time-lapse. I need to check the footage. She pulled out her laptop, connected the camera's memory card, and started reviewing the images. I watched over her shoulder as she scrolled through hundreds of night sky photos. Then she stopped. The image on screen was pure white, not overexposed, just white. No stars, no sky, no tower structure, just white. What is that? I asked. She checked the timestamp. This was taken at 2:37 a.m., right when the light split. She continued scrolling, 5 more images, all pure white. Then the next image was normal again. Stars, sky, the usual time-lapse composition. The camera couldn't record it, she said quietly. Whatever that light was, it saturated the sensor completely. I've never seen anything do that. But the camera was working before and after. Perfectly. Look. She showed me the images immediately before and after the white frames. They were perfectly exposed, perfectly focused. This wasn't equipment failure. This was the light itself. It was so intense it overwhelmed the sensor. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. We need to show this to someone. Who? Who do we tell who won't think we faked it or lost our minds? I didn't have an answer. We started the hike back to the tower. The descent was faster but harder on the knees and required constant attention to foot placement. We didn't talk much. We were both processing what we'd found. We reached the tower just as the sun was setting. I was exhausted, my legs shaking from the effort of the hike. Noel looked tired too, but more energized than worn out. The discovery had lit something in her. That night, we ate a quick meal and went through all the footage and photos again, cataloging everything. Noel had dozens of images of the ground sites. I had precise GPS coordinates. We had soil samples. And we had those 5 frames of pure white light. "I want to go back tomorrow night," Noel said. "Set up on the ridge. See if it comes back." "You think it will?" "It's been there at least 2 nights that you know of. Maybe more that you didn't see. If there's a pattern, we need to document it." I should have said no. I should have told her it was too dangerous, too unknown, too risky. But I wanted to know as much as she did. "We'll need to bring more gear, more batteries, warmer sleeping bags, and we should tell someone where we're going." "Who?" "The regional office. Leave a note with our route and expected return time. Standard backcountry protocol." She agreed. We spent the next hour preparing gear, checking equipment, and writing out a detailed itinerary that I'd radio to the regional office in the morning. Around 11 p.m., we tried to sleep. I lay in my sleeping bag listening to the wind, watching the stars through the window and wondering what we were getting ourselves into. At 1:43 a.m., I was jolted awake by brightness. Not the cabin this time. Outside. I scrambled to the window. The light was there again, but this time it was different. It wasn't hovering over the ridge. It was directly above the tower. Close. Maybe 200 feet up. A single point of brilliant white light, perfectly still despite the wind. Noelle. She was already awake, already at the window. Jesus. As we watched, the light split. One became 3, forming that same perfect triangle. The 3 points held their formation, rotating slowly around an invisible center point. Then they did something new. They began to pulse, not randomly, in sequence. Top point, left point, right point, top, left, right. The rhythm was precise, mechanical. Noel grabbed her camera and started shooting through the window. I don't know if this will work through the glass, but the light flashed. Brilliant white, so bright I had to close my eyes. When I opened them, the light was gone. The night was dark again. Noel was still holding her camera, but she was staring at the display screen. "Dylan, look!" The image on the screen was pure white, just like the time-lapse frames. She clicked through to the previous shot. Normal. The shot after, normal. Just the one frame, taken during the flash, was completely white. "It did it again," she said. "The same thing." We stood there for a long time, neither of us moving, both of us waiting to see if it would come back. It didn't. At first light, I radioed the regional office with our planned route and ETA. The coordinator acknowledged and logged it. I didn't mention why we were going or what we'd seen. I just gave him the facts. 2 people, ridge traverse, back by nightfall. By 7 a.m., we were heading down the tower trail again, this time carrying everything we'd need to spend a night on the ridge. The second hike to the ridge was harder than the first. We were carrying more weight. Sleeping bags, a small tent, extra food, water for 2 people for 24 hours, and all of Noel's camera equipment including a tripod and backup batteries. The temperature had dropped overnight, and patches of ice made the trail treacherous in places. We reached the ridge by early afternoon. Instead of stopping at the clearing where we'd found the marks, we pushed on to a small shelf on the eastern side where we'd have a view of the entire ridgeline and the valley beyond. It was exposed but flat enough for the tent. Noel set up her camera gear while I got the tent staked down and organized our supplies. The wind was steady and cold, cutting through our jackets. By 4 p.m., we had everything ready and settled in to wait. "What if it doesn't show?" I asked. "Then we got a camping trip out of it," Noel said. But I could hear the tension in her voice. She wanted it to appear as much as I did, maybe more. We ate an early dinner, dehydrated chili that was better hot than it had any right to be, and watched the sun set over the western peaks. The sky turned orange, then red, then purple. Stars began to appear, first a few, then thousands. Noel had set up 2 cameras, one on a tripod pointed at the area where we'd seen the light appear before. The other was a 360-degree camera that would capture everything around us. Both were set to record continuously. "If it shows up, we'll have it from multiple angles," she said. "And if it does that thing where it saturates the sensor, we'll have that documented too." Night fell completely. The temperature dropped into the low 20s. We huddled in the tent, taking turns going out to check the cameras every 30 minutes. The hours crawled by. 8 p.m., 9 p.m., 10 p.m. At 11:47 p.m., Noel was outside checking the cameras when I heard her call out, "Dylan, now!" I scrambled out of the tent. She was pointing north, back toward Sentinel Peak. There was a light rising from behind the mountain. It climbed steadily until it cleared the summit, then stopped. "That's different," I said. "It's never been over the tower before." The light hung there for maybe 30 seconds. Then it began to move toward us, not fast, but deliberately, crossing the distance between the tower and our position in smooth, controlled flight. Noel was filming, tracking it with her handheld camera, while the tripod camera captured the wider view. I just watched, my heart hammering, as the light got closer. It stopped about half a mile away, hovering over the northern end of the ridge. Then it split. One light became 3, forming that triangular pattern we'd seen before. The 3 points held their formation for 10 seconds, then began to move independently. They spread out, each one moving to a different position along the ridge. They stopped at 3 points that, I realized with a chill, corresponded exactly to the 3 sites where we'd found the ground marks. "They're marking the locations," Noel whispered. "The same places they sampled before." The 3 lights held their positions for maybe a minute. Then, simultaneously, they began to descend. They dropped straight down until they were just above the ground, maybe 10 feet up, and held there. Something appeared beneath each light. It was hard to see in the darkness, but I could make out movement. Shapes, dark against the lighter rock. "Do you see that?" I asked. "I see it." The shapes moved around the lights, methodical, purposeful. I couldn't make out details, but they were clearly working, doing something on the ground. Then one of the lights brightened dramatically. A beam dropped from it straight down to the ground. Where it hit, I could see the earth glowing faintly orange. The beam held for maybe 5 seconds, then retracted. The other 2 lights did the same thing in sequence. Beam down, ground glows, beam retracts. Then the shapes beneath the lights stopped moving. They seemed to fold inward, collapse. It was impossible to describe. One moment they were there, the next they were gone. The 3 lights rose back to their original height, converged back into a single point, and climbed rapidly. Within seconds they were high above the ridge. Then, without warning, they split again. Not into 3 this time, but into dozens of smaller points. The points scattered in all directions like sparks from a fire, moving at incredible speed, and within seconds they were all gone. The sky was empty again. Noel and I stood there, not moving, barely breathing. Finally, she lowered her camera. "Tell me you got that," I said. "I got it, both cameras, the whole thing. We need to check those sites, now. It's dark. We should wait until morning." "I'm not waiting. I need to see what they did." I grabbed my headlamp and started down the ridge toward the nearest site. Noel followed, carrying a flashlight and her camera. We reached the clearing where we'd found the first set of marks. There was a new mark, right in the center of the triangle formed by the original depressions. This one was different. A perfect circle, maybe 2 feet in diameter, pressed into the earth. The soil inside was darker than black, almost like it absorbed light, and it was warm. I could feel heat radiating from it even though we were several feet away. "Don't touch it," Noelle said. I wasn't planning to. She documented it with photos and video while I examined the surrounding area. The original marks looked deeper now, more defined. And there was something else. The soil around the new mark had a crystalline structure, like it had been flash heated and cooled so fast it turned to glass. We checked the other 2 sites. Identical new marks. Same dark soil, same heat, same crystalline edges. "They're doing something to the ground," I said. "Something that requires multiple visits. Or they're taking samples. Deep samples." We went back to our camp and spent the next few hours reviewing the footage. Noelle's cameras had captured everything. The lights splitting, moving independently, descending, the beams hitting the ground, the shapes moving beneath the lights, dark, indistinct, but clearly there. And then she showed me the frames captured during the bright flash. Pure white again. Complete sensor saturation. But this time, we had footage from the 360-degree camera from a different angle. That camera had also recorded white, but just for a split second. After the flash, it showed the 3 lights already merged and beginning to split into the multiple points. Whatever that flash is, it affects cameras differently depending on angle and distance, Noel said. But it consistently overloads the sensors. I've never seen any natural phenomenon do that. This isn't natural. No, it's not. We tried to sleep, but couldn't. We sat in the tent, reviewing footage, taking notes, trying to make sense of what we'd seen. Around 4 a.m., Noel asked a question I'd been avoiding. "What do we do with this?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, do we go public? Do we report it? Do we show this to scientists, the government? What's the right move here? I don't know. Part of me wants to tell everyone. Get experts involved, figure out what this is. And the other part? The other part is afraid of what happens if we do. We get dismissed as cranks. Or worse, we get believed and then we lose control of the story. Government comes in, shuts down the area, classifies everything." She nodded. "I've thought about that too. I have colleagues who could analyze this footage. Audio experts, visual effects people who could verify it hasn't been manipulated. Scientists who study atmospheric phenomena. Would they take it seriously? Some of them. The ones who understand that weird things happen, and most of them have rational explanations we just haven't found yet. And what if there isn't a rational explanation?" She looked at me. "Then we're documenting something that changes everything." We stayed on the ridge through the next day, documenting the sites in daylight, collecting more soil samples, taking measurements and photographs. The new marks were still warm to the touch even 12 hours after they'd been made. The heat was faint but measurable. We checked with a basic thermometer and found the soil inside the marks was 15 degrees warmer than the ambient ground temperature. "That doesn't make sense," I said. "The sun hasn't hit this spot all day. It's been in shadow. The temperature should be dropping, not holding steady. Unless there's a heat source below the surface. Or the soil itself was altered in a way that retains heat." We took samples from inside the marks, from the crystalline edges, and from undisturbed soil nearby for comparison. Noel sealed everything in labeled bags and packed them carefully in her gear. By late afternoon, we packed up camp and started the hike back to the tower. The return trip took 5 hours, and we reached the tower just after dark, exhausted and footsore. I radioed the regional office to confirm our safe return. The coordinator acknowledged and asked if we'd gotten the footage Noel needed. I said yes. He didn't ask for details, and I didn't offer any. That night, Noel transferred all the footage to her laptop and backed it up on 3 separate drives. She worked methodically, organizing files, adding timestamps and notes to each clip. "I'm going to show this to someone," she said. "A friend who works at the University of Wyoming. He's a geophysicist. If anyone can help us understand what's happening to that soil, it's him." "What if he doesn't believe us?" "He'll believe the footage and the soil samples. That's physical evidence. That's what matters." She left the next morning, hiking down with her full pack and all her equipment. Before she left, she handed me a flash drive. "Backup copy of everything," she said. "Just in case." "Just in case what?" "I don't know, but I feel better knowing you have it." I watched her disappear down the trail, then climbed back up to the tower. I had 4 more days before I was scheduled to close up for the season. 4 more nights to watch the ridge and see if the lights came back. They did, that night and the next. Each time, the same pattern. Single light, split into 3, position over the marked sites, descend, work the ground, merge, split into multiple points, scatter, and vanish. I filmed it each time with my phone. The quality wasn't as good as Noel's cameras, but it was something. And each time during the bright flash, my phone's camera captured nothing but white. On my last night in the tower, something different happened. The light appeared earlier than usual, around 9 p.m. instead of after midnight. It split into 3 as expected, but this time the 3 points didn't go to the ridge. They came to the tower. They stopped maybe 100 yards away, hovering at the same altitude as the cabin. I could see them clearly through the windows, 3 perfect points of brilliant light, arranged in a triangle, perfectly still despite the wind. I felt fear then, real, primal fear. They were close, too close, and I was alone. The 3 points began to pulse, the same rhythm I'd seen before. Top, left, right, top, left, right. The pattern repeated exactly 10 times. Then they merged into a single point, held for maybe 5 seconds, and dropped straight down behind the ridge. My radio crackled. Static, then a tone, high-pitched, oscillating. It lasted for 10 seconds, matching the pulse pattern I'd just seen. Then silence. I sat there in the dark, heart pounding, waiting for something else to happen. Nothing did. The night was quiet except for the wind. The next morning, I packed my gear, locked up the tower, and hiked down to my truck. The drive back to Cody took 3 hours. I didn't stop. I didn't want to think. I just wanted to be around people again, in places with electric lights and cell phone signals and normal explanations for things. Noel called me 2 days later. I showed the footage to my friend, and the soil samples. What did he say? He confirmed what we suspected. The soil has been exposed to extreme heat. temperatures well over 2,000 degrees Celsius. He also found trace elements that don't match the local geology. What kind of elements? He wouldn't say over the phone. He wants to meet, both of us. Can you come to Laramie? I could. I drove down 3 days later and met Noel and her friend Dr. Marcus Kent at his lab on campus. He was in his 50s, gray-haired and serious, with the careful manner of someone who'd spent a lifetime measuring things precisely. He showed us the analysis results. Charts and graphs I mostly didn't understand, but I understood his conclusion. This soil has been altered at a molecular level, he said. The isotopic ratios are wrong for this region. The crystalline structures suggest flash heating and cooling at speeds that require technology we don't have. What are you saying? I asked. I'm saying this is not a natural phenomenon, and it's not anything I can explain with conventional geology or physics. So, what is it? He looked at both of us. That's what we need to figure out. But first, I need you to tell me everything. Every detail, every sighting. I need to see all the footage and know exactly where these sites are. We spent the next 4 hours walking him through everything. The lights splitting and merging. The shapes beneath them. The marks on the ground. The way cameras couldn't capture the bright flashes without saturating completely. When we finished, he sat back and was quiet for a long time. Finally, he spoke. I have colleagues who need to see this. People who study anomalous phenomena. But I need your permission first. Will they take it seriously? Noel asked. The ones I'm thinking of will. They're scientists, not sensationalists. They understand that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And you have evidence. I looked at Noel. She nodded. Okay, I said, show them. But I want to be involved. I want to know what they find. You will be, I promise. Dr. Kent made his calls. Within a week, we were sitting in a secure conference room in Laramie with 3 other researchers. Dr. Ellen Vance, an atmospheric physicist. Dr. Raymond Soto, who studied electromagnetic phenomena. And Dr. Patricia Caldwell, an astronomer who specialized in what she carefully called transient anomalous phenomena. They spent 2 days reviewing everything. The footage, the soil samples, the GPS coordinates, our written accounts. They asked questions, detailed, specific, skeptical questions designed to find holes in the story or alternative explanations. They found none. At the end of the 2nd day, Dr. Caldwell spoke for the group. We can't identify what you documented, she said carefully. But we can confirm what it isn't. It isn't aircraft, conventional or experimental. It isn't atmospheric phenomena. It isn't ball lightning or any other known electrical phenomenon. The behavior is too controlled, too systematic. And the physical evidence, the soil alterations, the heat signatures, the electromagnetic effects on cameras, none of it fits any natural explanation we have. So what do we do? Noel asked. We document more, Dr. Vance said. If this is happening at one location, it might be happening elsewhere. We need to look for patterns, other sites, other witnesses. And we need to monitor the original sites, Soto added. See if the activity continues. If it does, we can set up proper instrumentation. Spectrometers, radiation detectors, high-speed cameras designed for scientific analysis. Will that be safe? I asked. They came to the tower. They got close. They didn't show aggression, Mr. Caldwell said. They pulsed lights in a pattern and transmitted a tone through your radio. That sounds like attempted communication, not a threat. Or a warning. Possibly. Which is why we need to be careful. Observe without interfering. Document without provoking. Over the next month, the team set up monitoring equipment at the ridge sites. Motion-activated cameras, electromagnetic sensors, ground-penetrating radar, spectrometers that could analyze light frequencies. They built it all into weatherproof cases and camouflaged it carefully so it wouldn't be obvious from above. I went back up twice to help with the installation. Noah went up 3 times, filming the process, documenting the equipment placement. We were building a scientific observation post in the middle of nowhere, all of us knowing that if word got out, we'd be shut down or flooded with attention we didn't want. The lights came back. Not every night, but often enough. The equipment captured it all, spectrometer data showing light emissions and frequencies that made no sense. Electromagnetic readings that spiked off the charts. Thermal imaging showing heat sources that appeared and disappeared without any visible source. And the ground marks continued to appear, always in the same triangular pattern, always with that same dark soil and residual heat. In February, Dr. Soto brought me a printout of data from one of the sensors. Look at this. The electromagnetic pulses follow a pattern, mathematical. It's not random, it's structured. Like a signal, like information. We're analyzing it to see if there's meaning in the sequence. Have you found any? Not yet, but we're trying. In March, Noel called me. We found another site, northern Montana. Same marks, same triangular pattern, same soil alterations. How did you find it? A forest ranger reported seeing strange lights. Dr. Caldwell heard about it through her network and we investigated. Dylan, it's identical to what we found. Same pattern, same spacing, same everything. So, it's not just our ridge. No, it's not. Over the next 2 months, they identified 4 more sites. Montana, Idaho, Colorado, all in remote mountain areas, all showing the same pattern. And at 2 of the sites, witnesses reported seeing lights split into 3 and merge back into 1. Dr. Caldwell compiled everything into a report. 50 pages of data, analysis, photographs, and first-hand accounts. She showed it to me before submitting it to a peer-reviewed journal. This will change things, she said. Once this is published, people will pay attention. Other scientists, the media, probably the government. Are you ready for that? I don't know if anyone's ever ready for something like this, but the data is solid, the evidence is real. Someone needs to say it publicly. The paper was submitted in May. It was peer-reviewed over the summer. 3 different reviewers confirmed the data was legitimate, and the conclusions were supported by the evidence. In September, it was published. The response was immediate. News articles, talk shows, podcast interviews. Dr. Caldwell and her team were careful in how they presented it. No wild claims, no speculation about aliens or government conspiracies. Just the facts. Unidentified lights displaying controlled behavior. Physical evidence of extreme heat and material alteration. Electromagnetic anomalies with no conventional explanation. Most of the scientific community responded with appropriate skepticism. Show us more data. Let us examine the sites ourselves. Give us access to the raw footage. Some of it was hostile. Claims of fabrication, delusion, attention-seeking. But the data held up. Independent researchers visited the sites and confirmed the findings. The soil analysis was replicated. The patterns were documented by multiple sources, and the lights kept appearing. Now that people were looking, more sightings were reported. Wyoming, Montana, Idaho, Colorado, even northern New Mexico, all following the same pattern, split into 3. Work specific ground sites, merge and scatter. I went back to work at Sentinel Peak when the tower reopened in June. The Forest Service had installed new equipment, better cameras, better sensors, all of it approved through a research partnership with the university. I wasn't just a lookout anymore, I was an observation post. The lights came back on my third night. Same pattern as always. But this time I had the professional equipment recording everything. Spectrometers, radiation detectors, electromagnetic sensors, multiple cameras capturing different wavelengths of light. They split into 3. They descended to the ridge. They worked the marked sites. And then they did something new. One of the 3 lights separated from the others and came to the tower. It stopped maybe 50 feet away, directly in front of the north window. Close enough that I could see structure in it. Not a solid sphere, but something like contained energy, swirling patterns of light that moved within a defined boundary. It pulsed. The same rhythm as before. Top, left, right. Except there was only one light, so it just brightened in sequence. 3 pulses, then it held steady. My radio crackled. Not static this time, a clear tone. Then a second tone, different frequency. Then a third. The 3 tones held together in a chord, then separated into a sequence. I recorded it on my phone. The light held its position for maybe 30 seconds, then moved away, rejoined the other 2, merged into a single point, and vanished. I sent the recording to Dr. Soto. He called back 2 hours later. Dylan, those tones, they're not random. They're harmonics, specific frequencies in a mathematical relationship to each other. What does that mean? It means they're communicating, or trying to. Those frequencies might mean something. We're analyzing them to see if there's information encoded in the pattern. 3 weeks later, he called again. We think we've found something. The frequencies, when converted to binary, produce a pattern. We're not sure what it means yet, but it's definitely structured information. Like a message, maybe, or coordinates, or mathematical constants. We're still working on it. It's been 14 months since that first night when I saw the light split into 3. 14 months of documentation, analysis, speculation, and slow progress toward understanding. We now know there are at least 47 active sites across 5 states, all of them showing the same pattern. All of them being revisited regularly by these lights that split and merge and work the ground in ways we still don't fully understand. The scientific consensus is forming slowly. This is real. This is happening. We don't know what it is or where it comes from, but it's not human technology, and it's not a natural phenomenon we've ever encountered before. Some think they're probes from elsewhere, studying Earth systematically. Some think they're accessing something beneath the ground. Energy, materials, information we can't detect. Some think we're seeing something interdimensional, existing partially in our space and partially in another we can't perceive. No one knows for sure. But everyone agrees on one thing. They're aware of us. The pulses, the tones, the way they came to the tower and transmitted those frequencies, all of it suggests intelligence and intent. Noel finished her documentary Pamishentinashentrine. It's being distributed through scientific channels, screened at universities, shown at astronomy conferences. It's careful, factual, and utterly compelling. People are paying attention now. Dr. Caldwell and her team continue to monitor the sites. More equipment, more data, more analysis. They've invited other researchers to join. The project is growing. I'm still at Sentinel Peak during fire season. Still watching, still documenting. The lights come regularly now, at least once a week. They've stopped being surprising. They're just part of the pattern now, like weather systems or animal migrations. But I haven't stopped feeling that tension when they appear. That sense that we're being observed, evaluated, studied by something that thinks in ways we don't understand. Last week, something new happened. The lights split into 5 instead of 3. They formed a pentagon pattern in the sky, held it for exactly 20 seconds, then merged and scattered as usual. Dr. Caldwell thinks they're expanding their pattern, testing new configurations, learning. Learning what? That's the question I can't answer. All I know is this. Every night I'm up in this tower, I scan the horizon. I watch the ridge. I wait for the lights to appear and split into 3, or 5, or 7, or however many they decide to become. And I wonder what they see when they look at us. What they're learning from studying our world. What they want from us, if anything. The footage Noel and I captured that first night has been viewed by thousands of researchers now. The white frames, those moments when the light was so intense it overwhelmed every camera pointed at it. Those frames have become iconic, evidence that we're dealing with something beyond our current understanding. I keep that original flash drive Noel gave me in a safe place. Backup of everything from those first encounters. Sometimes I watch the footage late at night when the tower is quiet. I watch the single light split into 3, watch them work in perfect coordination, watch them merge back into 1. And I think about what Dr. Caldwell said. This changes everything. She was right, it does change everything. Not all at once. Not with dramatic revelation or cosmic wisdom delivered from the stars, but slowly, steadily, one observation at a time. We're not alone in studying this planet. Someone, something else is here, conducting research of their own. Systematic, patient, methodical. They split their light into 3, and in doing so, they split our understanding of the universe into before and after. Before, when we thought we knew what was possible. After, when we learned we'd been wrong. I'm still here, still watching, still waiting to see what they do next. Because whatever they are, wherever they're from, they're not done yet. The pattern continues. The sites multiply, the data accumulates. And every time that light appears on the horizon splits into 3 perfect points and begins its systematic work on the ridge, I'm reminded that the universe is larger and stranger than we ever imagined. The light that splits into 3 is still out there, still working, still studying. And we're watching back. That has to mean something. The question is, what happens when they decide we've seen enough? I don't have that answer yet, but I'm here, at 9,800 feet on Sentinel Peak, with cameras and sensors and instruments designed to capture whatever comes next. Because something will come next. The pattern demands it, and when it does, I'll be ready to document it. To add it to the growing body of evidence that proves we're part of something much larger than we understood. The light splits into 3. The cameras record white. And we keep watching. That's where we are now. That's where this story stands. Not at an ending, at a continuation, at an ongoing observation of something that refuses to fit into the boxes we've built for understanding the world. I wake up every morning in this tower, make coffee, check the instruments, and scan the horizon. And every night, I watch the sky, waiting for the light that splits into 3, wondering what it will teach us next.